Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humsley Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar.
Hello,
and
lady.
Unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's Plank of the Week, he's got a sizable plank.
And apparently,
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you so much for joining us. I'm here all the way till 1 o'clock, you lucky, lucky things. And lots to talk about at home and abroad. Extraordinarily yesterday, we had Donald Trump in a very long Truth Social post blaming Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky for derailing his peace plan. The US president said Zelensky was prolonging the killing and warned Kyiv to accept US demands or risk a complete Russian takeover in a few years' time. This comes after Zelensky said on Wednesday that Ukraine would not accept Crimea legally becoming part of Russia, a key demand in Trump's 7-point plan to end the war. Is it Trump's 7-point plan or is it actually Putin's? Because it could have been written by the Kremlin. It really, really could have. We'll be talking about that. Plus, households in the south face paying more for electricity under plans being considered by Net Zero and Energy Secretary Ed Miliband. The move would lead to prices being determined by supply and demand in each different area of the country, with Scotland benefiting from greater wind supplies. But isn't this unfair on southern softies like myself who need their heating on even in May? Plus, Chancellor Rachel Reeves has confirmed in an interview that a EU youth mobility scheme, as it's being called, to allow Europeans aged 18 to 30 to temporarily live and work in the UK and vice versa, our young people being able to work in the EU countries, is being discussed with the EU. I mean, it's just free movement by the back door, folks. That's all it is. They're doing exactly what we knew they'd do because they spent 4 years trying to fight Brexit and now they're trying to get it through without us noticing. I hate to tell you, we have noticed. Plus, the Lib Dems, unusually, are pushing for a law which I actually agree with because they're quite big on banning things. They're not Liberals and they're not Democrats. We know that from the last few years. But they are calling for a new law to ban playing loud music on trains, so through your phone speaker as opposed to in your earphones, although I'd say I'd include people playing it loud on their earphones too, in a crackdown on headphone dodgers. Offenders could be fined up to £1,000 under the plans, which have also been backed by the Tories. Oh, bring it on, people. Loads more to talk about, some more serious than others in terms of our topics. And to join us for all of that, I'm delighted to say, as always on a Thursday, Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, joins us. Good morning, she said.
Good morning. Headphones on, people being loud on trains and public transport. I'm sorry, I'd be slightly more right of Genghis Khan and dealing with
I mean, totally. people would be very surprised to learn, given, this mouth never stops, is that actually I'm really quiet. I'm genuine. I'm really quiet on public transport, on planes and things. I certainly, expected, kid to be. Things, my view is, if you can hear my kid, then I'm failing as a parent.
Yes.
That's my rule.
100%.
Okay, it's really simple. It used to be everyone's rule, didn't it? Until the good old olden days. The people with their I'm just watching a video at full blast. I always look at people and go, excuse me, and they're sort of like, oh, what? What's your problem? You think, the fact that I need to explain it to you is a bit of a worry, but the FaceTiming, the
Yes.
urgent phone call to say absolutely nothing, FaceTime on public transport. But again, will £1,000 fines be enough? Or, as I've suggested on many occasions, and don't complain to Ofcom, I'm talking about changing the law, I'm not talking about this being out of the law. Snipers. I've said this before, I'll say it again. The solution for misbehaviour, rudeness, thoughtlessness, feet on seats, headphones too loud, playing on headphones, you name it, everything. Loud sniffing, I'm going to go with that as well. Constant sniffing on public transport is snipers. I'm just saying.
Well, they don't allow me to carry a weapon in public anymore.
I'm not allowed a
probably
weapon.
A good thing.
I'm not allowed a weapon at all, but that's general agreement of the family and everyone we know that I should never be allowed a weapon.
Loud sniffing causes me a gag reflex. So if you get someone who sniffs out, you just go to pretend that you vomit all over them and say, "Sorry, I've got a gag reflex. If you do that again, I will probably vomit on you." It stops it.
I'm literally in love with you right now. I'm going to try that on the tube on the way home. Anyway. She said, big sniff. No, I said someone who's had coughing fits on the show. Apologies for that the last couple of days. I can't help it. It won't stop. That was going to be a topic I was going to get to later in the show. But no, let's make the whole 3 hours about that and bin collections, and I'll be happy. No, look, let's talk about world affairs and your area of expertise, of course, in terms of where we are in terms of the war in Ukraine. Donald Trump has, I think, extraordinarily in a Truth Social post, very lengthy one. Written clearly by the Kremlin. I don't know how he could have come up with any idea. He's blamed Zelensky for derailing his peace plan. These talks were downgraded in London yesterday. He said that because he's refusing to accept the loss of Crimea, he said he's simply going to prolong the killing. He said he can have peace or he can fight for another 3 years before losing the whole country. He said the statement made by Zelensky today, which was simply a statement saying we can't accept that we accept the loss of... And he's not talking about, look, you're going to have to give up Crimea now and some regions of the Donbass in return for, we're just going to freeze the war. Now, that is something we think that, actually many in Ukraine would be willing to, not welcome, be willing to live with. He's talking about legally accepting that Crimea is Russian. How could the country ever possibly do that? And for him to say that the statement made by Zelensky today will do nothing but prolong the killing field, nobody wants that. We're very close to a deal, but the man with no cards to play, he describes Zelensky, should now finally get it done. Is Zelensky to blame?
Definitely not. And if Donald Trump had been properly briefed, the Ukrainian constitution doesn't allow Zelensky to make those sorts of decisions. The Ukrainian parliament would not back it in any way, shape or form. Zelensky's already proposed that the territories that Russia has captured at the moment, which includes Crimea, would be part of some form of diplomatic settlement in the future, recognising that the front lines freeze where they are, but it's not ceding the territory formally to
we'll accept the de facto situation, exactly, but not the de jure.
And Zelensky's already done that. And Zelensky's given everything to say he's willing to go for a peace settlement now. Why Donald Trump is continuing to turn around and just repeat Vladimir Putin's demands and give him more. There's no logic behind it whatsoever, and it's potentially very destabilising for the rest of the world. It's
bad enough to me that Donald Trump would try and claim that he's an actor between the two and that they're equally bad or equally good, which is completely factually wrong. Yes. One country invaded another, end of. we had that again. Putin's so keen on peace. He had this pretend Easter truce, which involved loads of bombings, but also I think it's now 10 people known to have died and many injured in attacks again on civilian sites in Kyiv overnight. By the way, all those people who are so upset about attacks on civilian sites in Gaza because it's such an absolute war crime. Remarkably quiet when it's Ukrainians getting killed. Yes. By the way, that doesn't matter because it's Russia doing. It's just wrong flag, people, wrong flag. But it's bad enough that Putin, Trump. Genuinely interchangeable on this issue. They really are, though.
They are.
That Trump should actually take that attitude. But the fact that he paints Putin as the good guy who wants peace and Zelensky as the bad guy, there is no scenario in which America or any American would say, absolutely, you can have Florida and California, because that's what we're talking about. We are talking about ceding to vital parts of Ukrainian territory. I mean, the Donbass region is where all the minerals are.
Yes,
it's the industrial heartland of Ukraine. Crimea, strategically very, very important. The idea that America would go, yeah, finally, and that president who agreed to that would be someone who wanted peace. This isn't a peace, it is a surrender.
Oh, it would be a complete and forced surrender. But even if Donald Trump says that he recognises Crimea as Russian, that doesn't mean that it's recognised under international law as Russian, because it's not. The EU have already said that they're not going to recognise it, so it's creating a greater disparity between UK policy and EU policy, and the UK will be following EU policy within this. And Donald Trump is isolating himself even more. There's no logic behind it, and he's playing into Putin's hands. But if you look at the individual that he's got carrying out the negotiations, Steve Witkoff is a real estate lawyer and Donald Trump's golfing partner.
I understand he's got, a very low handicap.
Well, yes.
Which apparently is what equips you for...
Yeah, well, I've got a handicap of one round white ball that never goes where I want to do it any time I've whacked it. But that doesn't make me an international diplomat. And Putin's playing him like a grandmaster.
But here's the thing.
And Witkoff's never been to Ukraine.
Yeah, he's been to Russia
the
fourth trip to Russia,
3 or 4 times.
Yeah. This is the thing. I don't understand. So I'll get, there'll be loads of messages coming in saying, you Trump derangement syndrome. No, I've supported him on the Middle East, supported him on immigration, supported him on DOJ, supported him on loads of different issues. He's wrong on this. Yep. He's wrong on the tariffs, and he's wrong on this. He's not playing 4D chess. He's being played himself. Why do so many people who talk about MAGA and making America great again, why do they want a president who, and bearing in mind, Donald Trump can turn on a dime on this one. He could be persuaded by the last person in the room on something like this. Why? There's no moral stance. There's no ideological stance on this. This is just he wants a deal. He wants to prove he can do a deal. Well, look, anyone can do a deal. I can do a deal. I can sell your house in a day. Yeah, if I say I'll give you my house for £100, yeah, I can do the deal in a day. But it doesn't mean it's a good deal. And this is the crucial thing. We need to kind of persuade the American people, the American Republicans in particular, to persuade Donald Trump that you're embarrassing your own country. This is a humiliation. This is up there with the withdrawal from Afghanistan level of humiliation for the American people and the state, the United States of America to try and surrender like this to Vladimir Putin, for goodness sake, of all people. What should the British stance be?
Well, I think we should attack the White House. We should capture the East Wing and negotiate giving part of it back, because we've got it. That's what Trump's effectively trying to do. Yeah. The British stance is, more seriously, is acting as much of a conscience as we can to Donald Trump. But he doesn't listen. But we do have a hidden ear to whisper behind closed doors and try and suggest.
But also crucially, Ukraine has now got an amazing war machine going. They can manufacture an awful lot of the weapons that they need. A lot of that high-tech weaponry that was sent by America didn't actually perform quite as well as many had expected it to. They're willing to fight. They've got the ability to fight. What they need is money to buy a load of munitions. Well, you know what? We've got hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of Russian assets sitting in banks. Hand it over right now. We don't want Russia to get it back. We don't want those oligarch crooks to get it back. Hand it to Ukraine. Yeah, there'll be some corruption. Of course there will. There always is in war. And let's allow them to fight, I say. But anyway, look, let's talk about fighting on other issues. Let's talk about social media. Question I'm actually... I love, as you know, I'd love to hear from you on all the topics we're talking about. But Peter Kyle, who's the Science and Digital Secretary, he said in an interview today that he was looking at the online equivalent of a TV watershed for children for social media, amid concerns of the addictive nature of social media disrupting their sleep, family life, and of course mental health. But he said he's looking very carefully at the impact of a 10 p.m. curfew for under 16s introduced by TikTok. By the way, your kids shouldn't be on TikTok. No one should be on TikTok. No. And tools for parents to switch off access at set times, and encouraging other companies to consider similar features. This comes as today the Ofcom regulator publishes the final version of its children's codes as part of the Online Safety Act, requiring tech firms to carry out robust age checks and ensure their algorithms don't direct harmful content to children. Now, the thing I find very bizarre is that we have algorithms in social media that direct content to people deliberately. It's quite clear to me that tomorrow social media companies could deliberately not direct that to adults as well as children. I would say adults don't want. I don't want to see anorexia sites and self-harming and trans ideology and suicide sites and all of that stuff either. I certainly don't want my kids seeing it. But they could stop that tomorrow if they wanted to. So I'm in favour of that. But in terms of like a social media curfew and all this talk about needing to act on child safety, is that the answer, or is this a job for parents and or schools, or is it a job for the government?
Primarily, children accessing social media is a parental job. Parents need to know what the kids are up to, and if they're hiding up in their bedrooms, then they need to understand what they're doing in their bedrooms. Now, there are other responsibilities here. I think social media companies should look at the content that is being accessed, and if one particular address is accessing self-harm, is accessing anorexia sites, or is accessing on a regular basis more than would be the norm, and the computers can
Why is anyone accessing
identify that instantly. What they should do is just freeze their account, just ban them from access for 24 hours, or in the same way that if you put something inappropriate up on
Why don't they just
X
not
or Twitter,
have that stuff up
well,
there?
they shouldn't have it on there, but again, you get the arguments around all the free speech addicts and everyone else that's saying you have to have everything that's available.
But these are the people. I mean, I've never understood the idea that social media should uniquely be a Wild West. But again, and I'm not very keen on hate speech or harmful. Talk about protecting kids from harmful content. What is harmful content? I would argue some girl sitting there saying, I was really miserable and unhappy, but now I've cut my breasts off and now I'm pretending I'm a boy or non-binary. Now I'm happy. I would consider that to be harmful content. Now, that's the stuff that's been promoted by a large number of the people, like the Peter Kyles and others, as helpful stuff.
This is where legislation should come in. And legislation isn't the answer to everything, because it's always trying to play catch up. You can't legislate against stopping kids from accessing stuff in their bedrooms. What you can do is turn around to social media companies and say, you must take greater responsibility. If people are accessing too much of this stuff, it's not an accidental click on or something else, freeze their accounts for 24 hours.
No, but the reason why they access a lot of it is, according to these algorithms, you click on it once, because what the hell is this? That's what you will then be taken to repeatedly. Teenagers see far more suicide and self-harm accounts than do adults. I mean, that was not something that was ever a discussion at my school. No one talked about this. I'm pretty sure, given that we all saw each other in the showers, that no one was doing it. And I know loads of teenage girls who have, and young women who've self-harmed, who've got the scars to prove it. This is an epidemic, and it is being fueled by social media, the social contagion. And look, I'm of the view, parents, do your job. We talk about this all the time on the show. Do your job, parent your children. But the average parent, like I'm married to an IT consultant, so at least I've got somebody who can actually learn how to do these things. We've reserved the right at any time, before our daughter was 18, like, we have a right to look at your social media, look at stuff. She's just not interested in that stuff. She's much more into just being out and hanging out with her mates and in real time with real people, because she knows, we've always been very sociable. We don't just sit there, and we don't sit there on our phones at the dinner table and things like, we play. We're on holidays. You see these families. Breaks my soul. You see these families on a holiday, and they sit down at the table, and everyone gets their phone out. Mum, Dad, two kids, and they're all just sitting on their phones. No one talking. We've got a pack of cards out. We've got an ongoing score going. It's really, we're chatting and laughing, and it breaks my soul. These parents aren't doing it. Here's the thing: when your kid is in their bedroom, going back to that Netflix series and adolescence, you don't know what they're doing. Most parents are totally unable to be able to check what their kids are looking at online. There are apps which basically hide the stuff you're looking at. Kids have an Instagram account that their parents know about, and they have an Instagram account their parents don't know about, and Snapchat and whatever. They don't know what their kids are looking at.
Well, it's not just the fact that they don't know, it's the fact that a large proportion that are out there don't care. They don't they don't educate themselves, and this is the other bit that's in it. There needs to be greater education, not just aimed at the children, but aimed at parents as well, to say, look, you really need to be aware of what's going on. You need to take this seriously. And if incidents happen, and incidents will happen, then the authorities need to come down hard on the parents as well, and go, right, I'm sorry, yes, your dear child may have self-harmed and all the rest of it, but you're partially to blame, so we're going to hold you responsible.
Well, let's look at Axel Rudy Cabano. He's sitting in his bedroom accessing, and they knew he was accessing. Stuff all about, white genocide and bomb making and goodness knows what. I mean, and he was sitting in his bedroom for hours and hours on end and watching this stuff from young teenage years onwards. Hello, I mean, flagged when violence at school and the like. But do parents not understand you can take phones and computers away? It's like there's parents who go, oh, I don't know, my kid's sitting on his computer for 16 hours a day. Unplug it. Cut the plug off. Seriously, do you think your kid knows how to put a plug on, or what? They don't know how to do anything like that anymore.
Well, and a lot of
your job.
A lot of the Wi-Fi providers, a lot of the broadband providers and all the rest of it now have mechanisms where you can put timers on and switch the Wi-Fi off in the house for at a certain time. Why not do that? Again,
you're
that's parents being active.
And I do get there are some parents say it's really hard. Again, I know people like Catherine Burble-Singh, who's a head teacher I respect massively. She wants just a simple ban on mobile phones before the age of 16. I think that may be the answer.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's simply these are not good for children. Other than something which is genuinely you can send a text to your parents, say I'm walking home now. I think that may be the answer. I think our childhoods were much happier as a result, and I think that really may be the solution. And it also means much simpler, because one of the things about any controls for children will involve people identifying themselves as adults and not children. And at that point, I'm a little bit worried about the controls that the government has. I wouldn't have been a few years ago. After what happened during lockdown, I wouldn't trust it anymore.
And the confusion that's going to come in once the government starts to bring the voting age down to 16. But at 16 you still can't buy a knife, you still can't buy alcohol, you still can't get involved in porn or anything else. But you're old enough to vote.
Yeah. It's a deep side day, isn't it? I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Love to hear your thoughts on Ukraine. We're also going to be talking about households in the south apparently being set to pay more for electricity under plans being considered by the man who is wrong about everything, Ed Miliband. That youth mobility scheme, EU free movement by the back door, and of course Tories set to lose half of council seats at next Thursday's local elections amid a surge in reform. All came up, of course, at PMQs yesterday. Going to talk about all of that. Love to hear from you. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. You can text on 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1 standard network rate message. This is particularly about, anything we're talking about, but particularly want to hear from you on social media curfews. The government is considering a social media curfew similar to the 9 p.m. TV watershed for children, because that works so well, because kids all stop watching telly at 9, don't they? But would that actually work? Would that tackle the harmful impact of social media on kids? What would you suggest instead? Get in touch. I'd love to hear your thoughts. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
That's why we want to get it resolved. That's why we've been turning up with solutions. That's why yesterday's meeting was a tad frustrating, because we could have done so much more, but we don't think we are far off. reaching an agreement if the council stick to what they're saying in public. And all those risks, absolutely. We don't want to see that happening. The best way to stop all of that is just negotiate constructively, look at the solutions we've put forward, turn up to ACAS next week. Don't just come to the table, but bring something to the table with you.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 10:25 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram's still with me as well. Let's get some of your messages coming in about our question, particularly about social media. Government is apparently considering a curfew similar to the 9 p.m. TV watershed for children. I want to know, will this actually tackle the harmful impact of social media on kids? Or can you think of something better? Tell us what you think. Do get in touch. Troy says, how is that going to help? Kids are smart enough to find ways around that one. Well, I mean, yeah, exactly. They'll be able to work it out more than their parents will. James says, would it require digital ID, surely? I worry this wouldn't be a good move. Yeah, exactly my concern as well. Matt says, shows how out of touch this government is with reality. You can just imagine how ghastly all their children are as well. And like, that liberal parenting. I mean, the liberal parenting that's really, really, really good at making unhappy children. There'll be those parents like, don't say no to my child. And, my child's expressing itself. Well, here's me expressing myself. Matt says, no, sorry, it's Matt. Brian says, kids will just use a VPN so they can pretend they're in a different country. Kids are more tech savvy than the government they are. Yeah, they Andrew says, what's this? A communist government now wanting to enforce a curfew on its subjects? What a staggering surprise. It'll be on adults next. Edmund says, social media is not healthy. Perhaps we encourage our kids to pick up a book instead of going on reels. Completely agree with that. And Damien says, how is that going to help? Kids are smart enough to find ways around that one. Again, how is it that everyone can work that one out? Let's go to Ian, who's on the phone lines in Hounslow. He's given us a call on 0344 499 1000. Lines open to you as well. But Ian, you wanted to get in touch about our conversation about Ukraine. What do you want to say?
Well, I just want to touch base on history. Have you heard of Florence Nightingale and the charge of the Light Brigade in the Crimean War in the 1870s? Well, we were fighting the Russians. The Russians go. Crimea has always been Russian. The people who live there are Russian. And this was a legacy now of a redrawing of an administrative map before the fall of the Soviet Union. And it was all going well until the West destabilised the government in Ukraine and put a fascist in power. Now,
Ian, you've been reading the wrong bits of the internet, my love.
Oh, don't give me that. I'm a very good historian since the First World War. Please don't patronise me. And the other thing is, if you're going to force Russia to give back the Crimea, well, let's get Israel to give the West Bank back to Jordan, right, the Golan Heights to Syria, and the Gaza back to Egypt. Then maybe they'll listen. Now, Crimea is their Gibraltar. It's strategically vital, and they need it. And if we're going to keep this up, millions of people are going to die. Russians and Ukrainians. Now, please grow up, show some realpolitik, and be a peacemaker.
Oh, I'm all for peace. There's a really simple way of getting peace. Russia could withdraw all its troops from another sovereign national territory. I hate to tell you that Russia, including Putin, actually recognised that Crimea was part of Ukraine as part of the territory when Ukraine agreed to give up their nuclear weapons quite some years ago. And it was Russia and Britain and America who actually guaranteed the sovereign integrity of Ukraine, and that included Crimea. There are Russian-speaking people in Ukraine. And in Crimea. By the way, Zelensky is Russian-speaking as well. There are many. That's not the point. This was a sovereign national state. The borders were internationally recognised, including by Russia. land changes hands over many decades and over many centuries. And that it is utterly meaningless what you've said.
And James Baker promised NATO would not go eastward in the deal with Gorbachev. And now we're right on the borders of Russia. We broke every promise, just like the Americans broke every promise to the American Indians.
Okay,
so we need to start.
Why did NATO expand, Ian? Why did NATO expand eastward?
Because they're justifying their existence
No.
after the end of the war.
No, that's not how NATO expanded. NATO is a defensive pact against Russian aggression, and countries on the border with Russia, understandably, we've seen two in the last year, Sweden and Finland, who've been long time outside NATO, never felt the need to join NATO because they wanted protection. What did they want protection from in terms of the NATO umbrella? They wanted protection from Russia.
Because the instability that was stirred up by Biden. I mean, I know NATO's a protective institution. That's why it bombed Libya, Afghanistan and Iraq.
Well, NATO didn't bomb Iraq. There wasn't a NATO vote for that. That was a coalition of the willing.
America and Britain are not part of NATO.
No, you can be part of NATO. The same way NATO wasn't involved in the Falklands War either.
Well, it should have been. An attack on one as opposed to an attack on all. So where were they when we were attacked?
Well, yeah, I agree with you on that. That's why I want us to have an independent military ability and not part of the EU or reliant entirely on America. I genuinely, I just find it absolutely extraordinary. This was Ukraine. Yes, there was a coup. There was also democratic elections. No country is perfect. It's a deeply, deeply corrupt country, as indeed is every former Soviet-controlled country, because communism it requires corruption to survive almost. But the idea that Ukraine was not a democratically led country with its own right to try and apply to join NATO and indeed the EU, as they had a complete right to do, and that justified a Russian invasion and justifies giving Putin any territory he wants, I find utterly bizarre that you should think that.
That's not with agreement with James Baker. The whole idea that Gorbachev managed to persuade the reactionaries within the Soviet Union. There was attempted coups. There was, behind the scenes, there was assassinations planned, and he said, no, we need to make peace. We need to end the Cold War. It hasn't worked. The Stalinist model hasn't worked. And what have we done? We've gone back on every promise we made.
OK, I hate to tell you that Putin isn't Gorbachev. Very, very, very different characters, very, very different morals, shall we say.
We created him.
We didn't create Putin.
Have you read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, dear?
Dear, is it now? Yes, I have.
Well, maybe that's
I think we created him. Putin is his own man. Putin is partly a creation of the Russian state and the Russian people who crave that strong man thing and have never really got to grips with democracy, because democracy is a Western construct and not something that has been grown, organically as it has, in a country like ours, in Russia. I just find it extraordinary. If you want to talk about people reneging on deals, again, Russia signed up to a deal when Ukraine handed over nuclear weapons to Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union to recognise the nation state and the sovereignty and the national integrity of the borders of Ukraine. So they've reneged on that deal. It's very, very, very simple. We shouldn't reward dictators like Putin, which he is. If you're talking about, a fascist dictator, I mean, this is an authoritarian dictator who murders opposition and journalists, for goodness sake, to keep in power. You shouldn't defend what he is doing. Zelensky is trying to save his own people in his own country from control by the Russians. Why are you on Putin's side and not Zelensky's?
I'm not on Putin's.
You're not?
Understanding doesn't mean approval. Understand doesn't.
So how do we get to the end of the war then? What would you do if you were in charge? Ian, are you there?
A bloodbath, and it needs to stop. And God.
So what would you do to stop it?
Well, accept that Crimea is Russian. Accept it's Russian.
And what about the Donbass? What about the Donbass? Should Ukraine give up the Donbass too?
Yes, and the Donbass.
And when Putin goes in 5 years or years' time to get more territory, should they give up that territory too?
He won't.
He won't.
To Dayton land.
Why won't he?
I'll tell you why. because we've got nuclear weapons and they've got nuclear weapons, and the cost would be too high.
But no, the cost is only high if he actually believes we're going to act. Why would Putin be afraid of the West if the West just surrenders right now?
What do you mean the West? Since when has Ukraine been part of the West?
No, when the West has been funding the Ukraine war. If the West basically says, no, Ukraine, you have to surrender your territory, he knows... Oh, my goodness me. Ian, again, I asked this question of everybody. OK, which part of our country would you give up to Putin if he decided he wanted it?
What part of our country give up to Putin? Are you... What, how close are we on the Russian border?
If he just decided he wanted it, if Putin was able to... OK, how much of Poland would you give up?
Well, you're ridiculous.
No, I'm not being ridiculous.
No, you mean Poland is not bordering Russia. Poland borders Ukraine. Poland borders Germany. It borders Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic. That's nonsense.
Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia... NATO members, would you give them up as well? Russia considers them to be Russian.
They do have Russian speaking, and most people speak. I know plenty of Lithuanians, and they speak both languages.
Yeah.
They spoke both languages.
I hate to tell you, former Soviet nations were required to speak Russian. The populations were required to speak Russian. I'm going to have to leave this there because I'm genuinely, Ian, there are so... I mean this respectfully. I really appreciate you calling in. I love having a debate and I want to hear opposing point of views, but I am genuinely terrified by how many people take this stance in this country because it genuinely disturbs me. Philip Ingram?
Well, and Ian talks history and he misses fact. Poland does border Russia.
It does.
It borders Kaliningrad. If you go back to Crimea, you had... The majority population through to the end of the 19th century were Crimean Tatars, which are different to ethnic Russians, different to ethnic Ukrainians as we see them today. The Russians purged them out during the annexation of Crimea between 1783 and 1800.
If we're going to do history.
If we're going to do history. Come further forward, it was Khrushchev that gave... Crimea to Ukraine because of the administrative ease that there was during the USSR. It wasn't Russia, it was USSR did it. Crimea is recognised as an integral part of Ukraine under international law today. Full stop.
10:37 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to talk to the brilliant, the wonderful Conservative peer, Lord Craig McKinley. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:38 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram still with me. Joined right now by Conservative peer, Lord Craig McKinley. A very good morning to you, sir.
Yeah, good to be on again with you, Julia.
Lovely to speak to you. Lots to talk about. We've been talking a lot about what's been going on abroad in Ukraine. I want to talk to you first of all about the possibility that households in the south could be paying more for electricity under plans being considered by Energy Secretary Ed Miliband. The General, if Ed Miliband's considering anything, it's probably a bad idea. He in interviews today said, look, this is just something that's being considered. It's about basically having, to all intents and purposes, different zonal pricing in different parts of the country. But of course, Scotland may have, a lot more wind and therefore they could actually be benefiting from lower prices than, for instance, the south ending up paying for more for their electricity. Does that seem fair and reasonable to you?
Well, I'm glad you asked me this morning. This has been very much on my mind. Read it in the Telegraph. Listen to Ed Miliband's absolute car crash from an interview this morning with Justin Webb on Radio 4. And yeah, you know, the concept that we can buy a McDonald's at the same price in Wales, Scotland, or the south of England, you've got the same minimum wage across the whole country, but because of the total failure of our energy system, coming up with yet another new sticking plaster to try and put things right. And it won't put things right at all. What this is all about is demand management. It is going to be, in the south, there's too many of you live there. There's not enough wind farms down that way yet. And so we're going to charge you more with the hope and the prayer that you might use a little bit less. But up in the north, where there are more wind farms and they have not been well connected to the grid, I mean, that's the failure we're talking about here, a lack of connection to the grid. You know,
but also we don't have the energy storage ability.
Well, exactly. I mean, we've got no storage and not enough local people to use that local energy. So the new grand idea is, because we've failed to link up the energy system or store it, if you live up in an area where there's lots of wind farms, not enough people to use it, we might charge you a little bit less. I don't know what the hope is, that you're going to start putting electric fire on or something. I mean,
well, it's quite bizarre, isn't it? I think it's also it's very, this is it's southernist. I'm married to a northern lad. And I say bloke from Stoke. I know a lot of you from the north go, that's not north, that's the Midlands. I'm a southern softie. I'm going to say, I have the heating on and a hot water bottle in June. Okay, I feel the cold terribly. I think southern softies like me are going to be penalised by this.
Well, of course. I mean, the South often is in terms of many taxes, certainly in terms of capital taxes. And I suppose you could argue in income taxes as well, where wages are consequently a little bit higher because it just costs so much to live down in the South. But the thought that we'll have zonal pricing just to try and do another sort of repair and mend of a complete failure of an energy policy, I'm afraid fills me with horror. But if you think it's a mad idea, you can be absolutely sure that Ed Miliband will be pursuing it.
Yeah, that's it. I have to say, you talked about a car crash interview on Radio 4 with him this morning. He was also on Sky News, which I caught a clip of, genuinely properly insane questioning about how a lot, the impact of, if we did more fracking and produced more oil and gas here, we would have lower prices here, as has happened in America and other countries that have done this. And he insisted, no, because we have to accept international pricing. And the question was, well, then how come America has lower prices for those things than we do? Is that partly down to the fact we've got this sort of 78p in the pound tax on energy companies in the North Sea? And he said, no, that has no impact on the price. He said, well, of course it does. In which case, let's put a 78p in the pound tax on every single item that we buy, because they'll have no impact on pricing. He was absolutely adamant. By the way, he has the same degree as I have in PPE from Oxford.
Oh, God, I don't know why I'm speaking to you, Julie. I don't know why I'm speaking to you with a PPE degree.
But genuinely terrifying. I mean, he knows nothing about climate change and science and energy policy, but he also apparently, even having done an economics degree, doesn't know anything about basic economics either.
Let's just focus on this argument that they always raise, that somehow our problems are because of the gas price. You state quite correctly that the US oodles of gas because they went up the route of fracking, and thank heavens they did, because we're importing their LNG at a huge CO2
liquefied natural gas,
liquefied natural gas. Natural gas. And thank heavens they did, because it's one of the reasons that we've kept the lights on in Britain and Europe over these last couple of years. And that's the reason they got very cheap gas. Obviously, there are zonal issues, but if it was worthwhile to store all that US LNG and then sell it to us Europeans, they would.
Yeah.
So they have a fraction of the price that we pay. And it doesn't hold scrutiny, where even places like Germany, hugely reliant on gas and coal still for their electricity, they all enjoy cheaper electricity prices than we do in the UK. Uniquely because of the failure of our energy policy, relying on unreliables, renewables, no storage capacity, they're hugely expensive, a myriad of support mechanisms, contracts for difference and constraint payments. I mean, just a myriad of mess. We now, if you look at your bill, have a 28 pence per kilowatt hour price for electricity, the highest in the Western world. And if we're saying gas is sort of the evil, well, how come even with a messy gas market that we have, because we don't store, we have very little storage, so we can buy when it's cheap and use it when it's expensive. No, we haven't got any of that. We've got about a tenth of the storage capacity as France and Germany. How come my gas per kilowatt hour is 5.5 pence?
Yep.
Hold on. So 5.5 pence for gas, 28 pence for electricity. Well, how does that work?
Yeah.
Am I missing something here? Or are they just trying to find a bogeyman so that they can pursue more and more renewable nonsense?
It's all just absolute made-up nonsense. It really is. I must point out, I mean, you've been chair of the Net Zero Scrutiny Group when you were an MP and still as a Lord, and you're also a director of the Global Warming Policy Foundation. You've been fighting for some sanity on this issue. Let's also talk about something else I know has been close to your heart, and that is Brexit. Now, what are the key things that people wanted when they voted for Brexit in 2016 and again in 2019 to get Brexit done, to elect Boris Johnson, was about basically, you know, closing our borders to the free movement of people. As it was, Boris Johnson then handed out visas to pretty much the rest of the world to come and stay in our country. But a crucial thing there was about the competition that a lot of people in lower wage jobs were facing from people being able to travel freely and work in our country from the EU, particularly Eastern Europe. Now we know that the government is definitely discussing a youth mobility scheme with the EU. This is something that's been confirmed by the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, during an interview. And she said there'll be no return to freedom of movement because that was ruled out in the Labour manifesto. But proposals for a youth mobility scheme were part of the talks with the EU about having close relations. So 18 to 30-year-olds being allowed to travel to the country and back and to work here, and likewise Brits being able to go over to the EU. Crucially, staying for less than a year and therefore not counting in immigration statistics, which I think would be rather crucial. Is this just another attempt to have free movement and get back into the EU by the back door?
Well, I think there's other things going on with this great reset or whatever they're doing over in Brussels. I mean, we hear that they've offered up again our fishing industry. Yeah. So that we can be part of a defence scheme for us to help defend Europe. Yeah. I mean, I don't
totally related. Totally related.
I don't know quite why fish and us helping Europe to defend itself are related in any great way. I really don't know. We've had some very strange bills coming through this building. We've got the Product and Metrology Bill, that's probably not the full name, but it allows ministers through complete and absolute Henry VIII powers to ape, as they please, any European regulation on product safety standards and size of things. So I don't know whether the British pint is under threat and the feet and inches. So heaven only knows. It's a very widely drafted bill that has slipped under everyone's radar. This is the true backdoor into sort of shadowing and complying.
Well, it's what they believe, isn't it? I mean, they've made no.
But it is.
Made no bones about it.
You had Keir Starmer himself during the Brexit wars, I call them, between 16 and 19, opposed all of the, anything to do with Brexit 48 times. So now he's actually got his hand on the tiller. Why should we be at all surprised? But on the youth mobility thing. Now, you might be surprised to say I'm not quite as jumping up and down as you think I ought to be. I mean, we have got a youth mobility scheme with New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and a very strange one, I don't know how it crept in, with Uruguay, would you believe? So if it sort of apes that type of thing, I'm not going to be jumping up and down. But I bet it will allow EU students to come back to our universities and us, Johnny UK taxpayers, to pay the subsidy for them to come.
Yep.
I bet it won't be exactly the same as that International Youth Mobility Scheme. It will be much, much more onerous on the UK taxpayer. Now, I asked a parliamentary question a couple of months ago, how much is outstanding still from EU students under the student loan scheme that they were entitled to apply for. Again, are they going to be able to apply for the student loan scheme to get loans from us? It came to millions that had not been collected because they've disappeared back to, Bulgaria, Poland, or anywhere else. All too difficult to collect.
And we're paying, and the taxpayer has to pick up the bill completely.
We'll just simply write it off.
I think we can safely say it will be. Again, this is just a concern of the sort of the North London dinner party setting. Oh, I want little Esmeralda and Sebastian to be able to go and spend their year in Italy and Tuscany or whatever. Honestly, this is what they consider as normal life. Lord McKinney, we'll have to leave it there, Conservative peer Lord McKinney. We're going to take a quick break and then we're going to be talking about the plan from the Lib Dems. A good plan for once, fining people up to £1,000 for playing loud music on public transport. Would you support that? Let us know. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
They're absolutely petrified, and I'm not surprised, because you see some of the people who are out this weekend waving banners saying they want to bring back witch burning or they want to hang you. And even people who are supposedly reasonable, and I use that word very loosely, cannot bring themselves to condemn these people, and the ones who are on their side will never ever say it was wrong.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philippa, just want to have a quick come back in on, I think in particular, that youth mobility scheme.
Well, the youth mobility scheme, my concern about that is that if you look at the majority of those that are sitting in Calais trying to get the little boats across, they're in that age group.
Oh, but not EU citizens, but I'm sure they can provide an ID card.
I'm sure they could find an ID card that they can't find whenever they're coming across. They could get something that would allow them to follow that scheme in somewhere or other. So it could be an EU dumping scheme if we're not careful.
Oh, very, very wise point. Thank you for that. Right, well, let's turn our attention to something completely different now. And the possibility of, it's backed by the Tories. This is a Lib Dem proposal. Not often I'm supporting Lib Dem proposals on many things, but on this, behind them all the way. A fine of up to £1,000 for headphone dodgers, people who played loud music on their phones on public transport. Calls for a new bill to stop noise pollution for commuters across the whole of the country. Let's talk about this with Norman Baker. He's a former Lib Dem MP and a former Transport Minister as well. Very good morning to you, Norman.
Hello, Julia. Nice to see you again.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. What do you make of this idea?
Well, look, I mean, there's undoubtedly a problem on public transport and in society generally, actually, of people who are just disrespectful to other people. Yep. And it was the case, I suppose, going back decades, that people behaved in a way that didn't inconvenience other people in public, and now they do. It's not simply loud music on trains, which does exist, but it's also, for example, people arguing very loudly and swearing in front of children. Yeah. It's people who have got mobile phone conversations going on at great volume for a long period of time. So this all comes down to just a disrespect for other people in the environment in which they share. So, the loud music's only one aspect of it. Yeah. I think it's a great pity we have to resort to the statute book. I mean, maybe we do. But I just wish that people would think about other people a bit more.
And that's the thing. Is this just bad manners? People just having a loud conversation. People, just again, the feet on seats. It's the loud music, the FaceTiming. Why people feel the need to FaceTime with somebody? You know what they look like. Just have a, this isn't like, I've not seen my child for a year moment. I mean, you're just talking to your mate. Just have a quiet conversation if you need to. And this incessant idea. But so much of it is when I do tackle it, because I am that sort of busybody. So if someone is playing their music just loud, watching an utterly pointless YouTube video, it's never something urgent. It's never like my child is trapped on a mountain, I'm calling mountain rescue. It's never an emergency, is it? No. Watching some YouTube video at full blast on the train, if you say, excuse me, would you mind putting your headphones on or turning the volume off? And they look at you like you're completely insane. Like, why would you even think that? And I always think, what's your home life like? Like, because you just think, A, raised by wolves, most likely explanation, and B, just there's this abject, complete lack of understanding that other people exist and that they also have needs and preferences. Yeah,
no, you're absolutely right. And I saw from the Lib Dem poll that was carried out that 54% of people wouldn't feel comfortable about asking other people to turn down the music. Yeah. And there's a high percentage for women, as a matter of fact. Yeah. Now, I mean, I do. I mean, if I'm on a train and it's particularly annoying, I will actually say something. I do so very politely. I said to someone on the train the other day, who was on a mobile phone conversation for 20 minutes, quite loudly. I went over and said, "Look, excuse me, would you mind being a bit more quiet because I'm trying to read?"
Yeah.
And I said, "If you're going to carry on like that, then you're entitled to do so. There's nothing against it. But if you are going to do that, then please tell me. I'll move to another carriage."
Yeah.
And the consequence of that was that they kind of apologised and reduced the volume and then switched off the phone.
I find a good tactic. Well, I asked politely the first time. Only the first time. The second, one of the other options is saying to someone, "Excuse me, would you mind talking a bit more loudly? Because I think there's some people at the other end of the carriage who can't quite hear everything."
Yeah.
And people are often quite surprised. And again, I know they'd be surprised to learn that I talk quietly on public transport because someone's choosing to listen to me blab on now. You've actually chosen to put the station on. I don't think you have to have it forced on you if you're sitting on the train. But
no.
do you think that this is the key thing? I think this should be fine. So again, certainly in London transport, it's illegal to drink alcohol because there's been an issue of people being very drunken and on the public transport. But so much of this is just a whole breakdown of societal norms and values and social cohesion and of authority, because in the olden days were we to have done this, someone frankly usually an older bloke would have gone, "Oi, stop it," and you'd go, "All right," and you might have got a clip round the ear. And I'm not saying we should go around hitting people, although I still think my sniper idea would work. If people thought there was a risk of the sniper, they wouldn't do it. But actually, this is a societal indicator of just a breakdown of social cohesion, of people being raised properly by their parents, and basic consideration for other people.
It's just totally that. And I must just say, though, in defence of the younger generation, that some of the people who have very loud phone conversations are actually my age or not really far short of my age. So it seems to have pervaded society as a whole. My concern about the proposal is one of enforcement, because someone's actually got to capture these people, if you like, and find them. I don't know whether that's going to form to the British Transport Police. It could do as far as the railways are concerned. There's no such authority on buses. And of course, what there used to be on all buses and on all trains was a second person beside the driver who was able to go through and give some comfort to people that there was somebody there to deal with problems. Now, you've got that on some trains, not all trains these days, some are the driver only. But when you've got a conductor or a guard on the train, they don't feel able to intervene sometimes. They feel intimidated and they walk past.
Yeah. And also that's the thing, is that the person, by definition, the person who's behaving like that doesn't understand normal standards of behaviour in public. So you then have to wonder, what else don't they get? Where else do they differ in terms of them? Are they carrying a knife? Are they carrying acid? Are they going to go? Are they feral? I mean, I say this to someone, as a 15-year-old who's got a criminal record for threatening to slash my throat at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the train. I mean, because that's a normal thing to do, out of the blue to a stranger. I mean, there are lots of very scary people out there.
There are scary people, but there's even more people who are just disrespectful to others. And, one of the major problems, I think, is people who put bags on seats on trains. Now, I put a bag in the seat, there's nobody there. Yeah. But as soon as the train starts getting busy, I move it up to the rack or something. And that's just a matter of courtesy to other people. But you see people now who refuse to move their bags, although the people are standing.
I had that when I was 8 months pregnant. It was the only free seat, and I asked a man to move his bag, and he said, "I don't want to put it on the floor." And I said, "Well, I've got a whole other human being inside me. I win." I mean, it was quite the most bizarre exchange I've ever. And I was so obviously heavily pregnant. Do you know what I think is really sad? That on public transport, many buses and trains, things, they actually have a sign saying, please give up this seat if someone who needs it more than you, carrying a baby, elderly, disabled or pregnant. Any society that needs to be told to give up their seat to any of those people is a society that is going into a very, very bad place. Norman Baker, great to talk to you, former Lib Dem MP, former Transport Minister as well. Philip Ingram, I mean, I'd love to be with you when I was tackling. I reckon you, but you're a man of a certain sort of size and authority that I think young or old, breaking the basic normal social rules would listen to you.
I have no problems asking people to turn their noise down.
I mean, I do. I always tell them.
And take their feet off the seats and you control their children and everything else.
I want to do all train journeys with you from now on.
Society should do that.
And people should back them up.
Yes.
I've actually had people say, I go, so would you mind turning your music down? And someone else goes, what's your problem? Well, I don't want to hear it.
And when it comes
and
to
then someone has to go at me. I'm thinking, but what have I done wrong here?
And when it comes to giving up seats, I was brought up opening doors for women and standing up when adults came into the room.
I know it's old-fashioned, isn't it? It really is. But again, do you need to be told to give up your seat to a pregnant woman? No. I'm sorry, you're just an awful human being. So much more to talk about. Your reaction. Give us a call. This is Talk.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week, the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humsley Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar.
Hello,
and
lady.
Unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's plank of the week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny that people keep calling me Meghan Markle, because it's Meghan Sass.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, with you all the way till 1 o'clock. Lots more coming up in the show, and particularly in this hour. NHS hospitals have been accused of seeking to defy the Supreme Court's landmark gender ruling, with managers and campaigners pledging unwavering commitment to trans people after they suffered apparently pain and concern from the judgment. I have to say, I mean, rip-roaring PMQs yesterday, which we took live on the show with Kemi Bejnok taking on Keir Starmer. And we're going to be talking to the Conservative Shadow Women's Minister, Mims Davies, in just a couple of moments about that. Plus, trans-identifying women, i.e. men, call them what they are, will still be allowed. Trans women, i.e. men, will still be allowed to run in the London Marathon as if they were women. The race organiser confirmed that those taking part in the event would be allowed to self-identify as male, female or non-binary, completely made up. But that will not be allowed for the elite aspects of the race because World Athletics doesn't allow that. So if you're not a very good marathon runner, you can just call yourself what you want. Deep sighs, everybody. Also going to talk more about Ukraine, as Donald Trump has blamed Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky for derailing his peace plan. The US president said Zelensky was prolonging the killing. He warned Kyiv to accept US demands or risk a complete Russian takeover in the next 3 years. This comes after Zelensky said yesterday that Ukraine would not accept Crimea legally becoming part of Russia, a key demand of Trump's, or who knows, Putin's 7-point plan to end the war. This came as we had a night of bombing of Kyiv with some 10 civilians killed in that attack from Vladimir Putin, who of course is very keen on peace while he's killing civilians. But there we are. All that coming up, plenty more besides. Philip Ingram is still with me. He's an MBE and former senior military intelligence officer. Thank you once again for joining us. Just before we go to our first guest, just your quick reaction to PMQs yesterday. Kemi Badenoch, all 6 questions, all about the Prime Minister and Labour's stance on the trans issue and women's rights. And she, called on the Prime Minister to apologise to Rosie Duffield, to other people who'd suffered, losing their jobs for basically saying the statement that the Supreme Court said, and the Prime Minister now accepts. What did you make of it?
Keir Starmer has failed to recognise that when you've dug a big hole and you're at the bottom of it, stop digging. If he turned around and said, I'm really sorry, I got it wrong, I got swept up in all of the wokeness that was going on across society, and felt that was right at the time, but the Supreme Court ruling has clarified it for me, and I have changed my mind. And why, if you never change your mind, why have one? I've changed my mind, let's move on from this. He'd have diffused it completely.
I think, he definitely should admit that, and he should apologise. I'm not quite sure whether it's going to be completely enough at this point, but let's talk about that with Mims Davies, Conservative MP and Shadow Women's Minister, who joins us right now. A very good morning to you.
Hello, Julia. I'm not sure you should change your mind as often as your socks. But I think
very good.
But I think it's important sometimes to, front up and say and do the right thing.
Well, indeed. I think Kemi Badenoch did a magnificent job at PMQs yesterday, and she took your job, didn't she, the day before, in response to Bridget Phillipson's announcement in response to that Supreme Court ruling last week. Took the Prime Minister 6 days before he actually said anything in response. And he still has not said the words that, trans women are not women. He still won't say that, although he has said it before, and he said it in only very recent months. Does he need to apologise, not just to, the likes of Rosie Duffield, a Labour MP, basically forced out of the Labour Party over this issue, but also to, the 51% of the population that he has been miscategorising for the last God knows how many years?
Well, I think he should definitely be fronting up on this. And he can't bring himself to do it. He couldn't do it at PMQs yesterday. And the tone of Bridget Phillipson when she came into the statement that Kemi took, and it's not often as a shadow minister that the leader of the opposition is raring to be at the box, but she has been working on this for some time. And many people agreeing, such as Rosie Duffield, that, why is it difficult to say what a woman is? It frankly shouldn't be. And that's the situation we've got ourselves in. And the Prime Minister, was again talking about men and anything else apart from fronting up to what the Supreme Court had to tell him.
Yeah, he was obsessed with Robert Jenrick, wasn't he? He talked about Robert Jenrick repeatedly. Yeah. He talked about Nigel Farage and not the actual issue. But here's the thing. Women. A lot of people, including me, and I was tackling this on air and also behind the scenes as well, talking to Tory ministers in the last government in power for 14 years. There was confusion. There wasn't any confusion in most people's minds. The pretend confusion over the Equality Act and what a woman was and what it meant in law had been going for a good 10 years of the time that Labour, that the Tories were in power, and yet there was an absolute failure to tackle that and to clarify the law. I know that Kemi Badenoch did try to do that as Equalities Minister for many years, and really did try to get on top of that, and I applaud her for that. But the Tories were in power for a lot of the time when the trans ideology took over our schools, our hospitals, our public services, many of our private sector as well, took away women's rights, put women's and girls' safety at risk in prisons, refuges and everywhere, toilets, changing rooms. And the Tory government did not act on this. A lot of people will be saying, thank you very much for being on the right side of history in the talk, but you didn't walk the walk enough. Do you think your party owes an apology to the women of this nation?
Well, let me cover that, Julia, because I think you're absolutely right that making sure that people who identify as trans, men or women, are not discriminated, harassed or attacked. That's one thing. But what you rightly said, over this last 10 years, and you know, this is how it's got to this point, that court cases have had to be held, is because it became clear in protecting a very, very small minority of people, women's rights were being eroded. And that is fundamentally wrong. I've been involved in the Conservative Women's Organisation for not far off 20 years. We are coming up to the centenary of universal suffrage, hard fought, hard won rights. Our safety, our well-being, our safe spaces being eroded for a minority of people who face discrimination every day. And you mentioned the NHS earlier. Again, instead of thinking about 50% of their patients, some people are coming out once again worried about a very small minority of people being discriminated. Nobody wants that. In the court's ruling, that was clear. Yeah. And what we haven't been able to do, and the Prime Minister yesterday wasn't able to stand up for women's rights, it's not a zero-sum game. But Kemi was right when she came into the equalities brief, and I was alongside her when I was doing the equalities role at DWP as a minister there, that Stonewall was dictating potentially how this law was being interpreted. So I very much praise For Women Scotland. I very much praise Rosie Duffield and other people who've come forward.
Yeah, but it shouldn't have been. It should have been up
to do the same.
No, but it shouldn't have been. It shouldn't have been the job of For Women Scotland. The three women we interviewed, one of the women who was victorious in that Supreme Court ruling. It shouldn't have been up to them to do this. You guys were in government. You were a minister in government. I know, you didn't make the final decisions. We had a number, God knows how many prime ministers over that time. And you'd rather leave it as a culture war and a bit of a battle to have at the general election, rather than actually making sure that, you got men who are pretending to be women out of women's prisons. There are still 2 men in prison in England who claim to be trans women who are in the women's estate. There are still girls today who are at school, primary and secondary school, who are having to use mixed toilets, even though they've got a right to single-sex toilets. There are still, refuges where men are allowed in. There are changing rooms in hospitals and wards in hospitals where there are men who claim to be women who are allowed in. We know that, NHS hospitals basically, plotting to defy this trans ruling, still fully on board with this stuff. We've got nurses going to employment tribunals. Those are still ongoing. They haven't been settled because they're simply saying, I don't want a man standing there pretending he's a woman watching me while I'm getting in my bra and knickers and changing my uniform. This stuff has all happened. It didn't just happen since Labour have been in charge. It's been happening for years, and it's happening today.
Yeah, and I acknowledge that, and I think you're right, and I totally agree that safe, fair and equal is my mantra. And what's been happening, you mentioned the London Marathon. Again, people who want to stand up for women's rights are being accused of not caring about others, and women care about everybody. But what was happening is our rights in different areas were being eroded, and it wasn't about toilets, it was about sex attackers, male sex attackers who identified in a certain way, then their victims having to call them a she. Look, for me, it doesn't matter who you are. Criminality is criminality, however you identify. And we as the Conservative Party need to be prepared to challenge that.
But Mims, you guys didn't do anything about it when you were in power. That's the problem.
But Julia, you're buying into exactly what Keir Starmer was saying to Kemi yesterday, and that is not true. And she gave the list of all of the work that she'd done.
No, she did brilliant. She did brilliant work. Oh, I mean, God, she issued guidance after guidance, got Stonewall out of her department, all of that. But at the end of the day, Stonewall's still massively being publicly funded across the country to push this completely misogynistic, illegal now, trans ideology, illegal advice, completely against the law. Police officers under a Tory government, male police officers pretending to be, I'm going to call them all that, pretending to be women, being able to strip search women. I mean, we're talking, this stuff happened. The schools that my taxes pay for, and everyone who's watching now and listening now, our taxes pay for those state schools, forcing girls to go into toilets with boys. That happened when the Tories were still running the education department. You guys could have stopped it all. Why didn't you?
Well, we issued the gender questioning guidance for schools, rightly so.
Well, are you in charge of schools or not when you're the government? If you can decide what kids learn in the curriculum, can you not decide whether they get to go to the toilet in privacy or not?
Well, and straight away, this new government scrapped that, and we don't know what they think now. And Bridget Phillipson couldn't confirm that in the chamber the other day. So we need clarity. We need common sense. You're the home of common sense. And frankly, so should our party be. And I think what we have seen is an erosion of women's rights. And I think, therefore, then people felt frightened to challenge that for the feeling that they would be excluding minorities. But ultimately, 50% of the population shouldn't be fighting to be heard. And I did much of this in the general election, fronting out on the media on this to talk about women's rights. So I think we've now got a point where we know exactly where we are, that women have felt for decades that we've had to keep fighting for our rights. And it's nuts at this point that we've had to do exactly the same thing. So we need the government now to front up and give people the guidance and for us to move forward. It's one thing saying you accept the ruling. The difference here now is, what does it mean for people's day-to-day lives? And can women stop having to fight for their safe spaces and for their well-being?
The campaigners that I've spoken to, and I've been in the forefront of this for many years as well, the campaigners are saying that they are, although very, very positive about the Supreme Court ruling, they also believe that things aren't going to change unless you have the threat of court cases. And again, lawyers should be queuing up, no win, no fee, guaranteed win on every single one of these cases where women's single-sex spaces are not being protected, whether it's in schools or hospitals or freedom of speech, these employment tribunals that are still going on in the private and the public sector on a grand scale. This is thousands of people are being affected by this. But it's taking individuals to stand up, whereas it should have been the Tory government, it should be the Labour government now, and having their feet held to the fire. But doesn't the number one thing need to be, we need Stonewall not getting a single penny of public money? It must be a crime for any local council, any school, any hospital, anybody at all to give any trans ideology group pushing the agenda that Stonewall has a single penny of public money.
So when I was a minister, looking where public money was going, I was always relentless in who got it and what was their guiding principles. And I think what you heard from Kemi rightly is that she and we will be relentless in holding this government to account, making sure that we do the right thing on behalf of women, making sure that those trans people, those people who are identified differently, that very small minority, are protected and not harassed or discriminated against, but equally that women's rights cannot and should not be eroded to make everyone else feel better. And I think that is the situation we got ourselves into. Let's be honest. So the mantra for our party is safe, fair and equal, and that women are at the heart of this, and we shouldn't have to be pushing for what we should be expecting. I agree with the safety in schools as well. You want privacy as a young girl, very much so, and it's really important that new guidance comes from the government and quickly. And yet Keir should be saying sorry and remembering what a woman is.
Yeah, I don't think he knows what a woman is. I still don't think he does. Mims Davies, thank you so much for joining us, Conservative MP, Shadow Women's Minister. Philip Ingram is still listening to all of that and listening in the studio. And again, this is the thing. Kemi Badenoch has been absolutely staunch on this. She genuinely was pushing. She was speaking out when the government really wasn't. She's, and she's been very clear, and I'm very grateful to her. She was brilliant at PMQs yesterday. Again, but I do just have this issue. Talk is cheap. Yeah. Talk is really, really cheap. And at the end of the day, when you are actually in power, and again, she wasn't the Prime Minister, it was down to the Prime Ministers who were in power to actually do this. The whole idea of let's issue guidance to a school about this and that. Sod that. No. Your toilets from next week need to be single sex only. That's what we've told you. And if they're not, your head teacher is sacked. Do you understand? We're paying for the bloody schools. We get to decide what the toilets are like, don't we?
But this is the trouble when governments are doing anything. They'll carry out a study and then they'll issue some guidance.
Consultation.
And after the consultation, and then there'll be a policy change, and then they'll bring in a body to monitor that. And it takes 5+ years. The people who've destroyed this, and you're quite right on Stonewall, extremist trans groups, of which a large proportion of those that are doing the shouting are not trans individuals, are the ones that have destroyed any hope of acceptance by those trans individuals out in society who just want to get on and live their lives.
Exactly. I don't know any people, and I've interviewed these, who trans people who genuinely have body dysmorphia, trans dysmorphia. They actually believe they are born in the wrong body. Again, I have nothing but empathy and respect and kindness towards those people getting on with their own lives. But you don't. Your rights in your life doesn't get to impose on mine. Sorry, or my child's or any other woman's. And this is the thing. But Stonewall and mermaids and organisations like that, they were given that power. They were given state. They were given state money. State organisations paying them. This is a big grift. Yeah. This is a money-making exercise. You've got to remember Stonewall, a fantastic organisation when it came to gay rights and bi rights. I mean, basically, seeking to get rights for gay and bisexual people that they did not have, that were equal with straight people, to get married and not to be discriminated against in the workplace and things like that. Absolutely crucial, vital rights that everyone who's right thinking should agree with. And then once those were won, they didn't have a raison d'etre anymore. They had to come up with something because they're all on the payroll. You couldn't just celebrate. Yeah, we've won, brilliant. I mean, your main aim in life, if you're a campaign group, should always be that you don't need to exist anymore because you've achieved your victory and then you move on. And yet they wanted to carry on going. So they came up with this idea that trans rights was the next barrier, the next big crusade that had to be fought in a civil rights campaign. And abject nonsense. And the damage they've done to children, the damage they've done to the fabric of society, to women's safety and rights, is just appalling. And the fact that we've got government ministers who, by the way, should have been sacked. Chris Bryant and Angela Eagles should have been sacked on the spot after those WhatsApp group messages were found by the Mail on Sunday, where they were basically saying, saying the Equality Human Rights Commission chair was appalling for saying, trans women are not women, trans women are not allowed, i.e. men are not allowed in women's safe spaces, and basically talking about how they could fight this Supreme Court judgment. You should be out of government at that point, okay? Well, you're not just opposed to the court, you're opposed to the law and to official government policy accepting that law.
And the Supreme Court judgment wasn't bringing in a new definition, it was clarifying the law as there was in the 2010 Equalities Act and how it should have been applied. And therefore, those that misapplied it, if they did that deliberately to cause harm, and many of the ministers did do that, because they took that as something to get them votes, so something they were getting out of it, should be disciplined, should be sacked, should be dealt with. And there needs to be that across society, and that will stop Stonewall. And again, with Stonewall, your mission creep, you get mission creep across the board, where you've achieved your aim and you then try and find something else to do. The military were terrible at that, and that's why Afghanistan was a debacle.
Yeah, exactly. But if it was Stonewall, there's that allyship and things like that. You have to show how many rainbow lanyards everyone has, and the flags, and I mean, look, even in this building, the training on how to deal with a trans colleague. I mean, it's just. It's all over the place. It is imbued in our entire nation now, and it needs to be gone. It needs to be gone.
The training is accept people who are different. Right, move on.
Move on. Yeah. And you know what? And we were already doing that. Yeah. Indeed. So 11:22 is the time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. We're going to be talking more about Ukraine. We're going to be talking also about children facing social media curfew under a Labour plan being considered by the Digital Secretary, Peter Carr. But should we have like a 9 p.m. TV watershed style curfew on social media, something that could be set by the likes of TikTok and Snapchat and whatever the kids are on these days? Is that the answer? Or do we just need a little bit of, I don't know, proper parenting? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and then your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. This is Talk with a Home of Common Sense.
absolutely petrified, and I'm not surprised because you see some of the people who are out this weekend waving banners saying they want to bring back witch burning or they want to hang you, and even people who are supposedly reasonable, and I use that word very loosely, cannot bring themselves to condemn these people, and the ones who are on their side will never ever say it was wrong.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. Philip Ingram still with me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Coming up, we are going to be talking about Ukraine with a former advisor to President Zelensky. Is it Zelensky's fault there isn't peace in Ukraine right now? Or is Putin actually the one who's responsible? Someone needs to tell Donald Trump. We'll talk about that. First up there, let's get back to the issue of social media. The government is considering social media curfews similar to the 9 p.m. TV watershed for children. The idea being that basically, kids are spending far too much time on their phones and they're sitting there looking at night. They're doom scrolling at night when they're in their bedrooms. And basically, this is what's been considered by Peter Kyle, the Digital Secretary, as one of the next steps after the Online Safety Act, which we saw the final version of the children's codes published by Ofcom, the regulator, today. They require tech firms to carry out what they call robust age checks and ensure algorithms do not direct harmful content to children. I'd rather they didn't direct harmful content to anybody. The problem here is lots of people are pointing out on social media to us right now, Philip, and we've been talking about, is that kids know much more about this stuff. They're much more tech savvy than their parents. They'll be able to get around this, surely.
Oh, they'll be able to get around it very, very easily indeed. Some of the comments have said they'll use VPNs, and with a virtual private network, you can change the country that you're in, and therefore you can get around the rules. And there's so many ways that the kids will get round anything that they want to see on TV.
But you have apps. You literally have apps. I mean, they have these apps for men, men and women having affairs, where you can have a separate app which looks like it's just some boring techie app, which you open it has all your messages, and hides everything. I don't understand these things. I'm not having an affair. But there are so many ways for people to get around it. The kids share all this stuff. It's the same. Look, I mean, does that mean you shouldn't have rules about it though? Because in the same way that you're not allowed to buy a drink until you're 18, and yet somehow teenagers manage to find places to get drinks, but also have fake ID. I say North London going rate, two fake driving licence, 57 quid. Bargain.
Yeah, but it is a deterrent, and I think there needs to be ID for certain things. Accessing, people buying controlled items online, people accessing pornography online, that sort of thing. There should be some form of verification. That'll put people off then going into it. But to legislate to stop children using social media in their own homes of a night, no, you can't legislate for that. You can't police
parents.
it.
That's literally like take the phones away. Yeah. But lots of parents don't do it. But then lots of parents. But then this is the point we were discussing the other day on the show.
Wi-Fi off.
What are parents left to do now? Because now the kids are getting fed breakfast at school. Yeah. They're being taught how to brush their teeth. Some parents don't even. I mean, this is the thing I find. How lazy a parent are you? You're not actually potty training your child. You want to be spending money on nappies until they're 4.5 years old? Are you insane? They cost a fortune. I mean, that is a level of feckless and laziness that defies belief.
Oh no, they want the schools to provide the nappies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you and I are paying for the nappies, obviously. But this is the thing. Is there anything left for parents to do? And we were talking earlier. I watch parents on holiday with their kids. You're on holidays, spending time as a family, and of course everyone's allowed to have a bit of time having a look at their phone. And I use my phone for work purposes. But they literally sit down at the table. They order a drink, and no one speaks to each other. Yeah. I've watched families where the whole family's just sitting there. Kids have got headphones on or watching a film, and parents just move the laptop or whatever, and then put a plate of food in front of them, put their headphones back on, and no one speaks. Yeah. And this is like in a fancy hotel. These aren't kids on some sink estate. Yeah. These are supposedly privileged kids, and the parents literally don't speak to them.
Yeah. And why waste the money going to a foreign country to go and visit and see bits of culture and all the rest of it? It doesn't exist anymore. This is the trouble. Society is falling apart, and we need to get back to good old-fashioned values. That's what will solve a lot of this.
I think the parents, those are those social experiments, you know, TV shows where they take the kids, they take the phones away from the kids and the parents. The kids are in cloud nine. They're playing card games, they're running around playing sport and everything.
They're talking to each other.
The parents are absolutely horrified because they're missing their phones. This is a parent problem, not a kid problem.
Yeah, it is. But you know, the parents now grew up with mobile phones, I think, just about, and this is just going to get worse. You know, we need to bring an education system back in.
Talk to your kids.
Aimed at parents.
Talk to your kids. Give your kids breakfast in the morning and talk to your kids. I know this is mind-blowing.
And if you don't want to talk to your kids,
don't have kids.
Don't have them.
It's just so basic, isn't it? I mean, you know, just a ban on mobile phones until the age of 16, which is what people like Catherine Birbal's Singh and others are calling for. I'm coming round to that.
But I think the exemption could be you can have a brick. You can have the old Nokia 3310 brick that does.
Can we just
else.
all have a little moment for the Nokia 3310? Beautiful, beautiful, happy days. By the way, a battery that lasted 3 weeks.
Exactly.
Not 3 hours.
Exactly. So you get round all of those parents who are saying, "Oh, we need it for the safety because we don't."
My daughter had a phone when she was year 6, so the final year of primary school, and we gave her again a brick. So she could text us when she'd got to school and got, you know, I mean, first time she was walking to school on her own. I mean, it's a 10-minute walk. Again, I was walking to school when I was 7 years old across main roads and things.
I did the same.
School holidays, I mean, genuinely, you'd be thrown out of the house at 9, told with a sandwich, told come back at 6 p.m. and don't come back in beforehand. Oh, every kid in the street would be out in the street for like 12 hours and no one cared.
Yeah, I'd walking. You walk past the car bomb that was just about to go off because that was happening my time. So we didn't have the mobile
different
phones
childhood in Northern Ireland.
Parents went, "Oh, you've got home before it went bang. Great."
That's a different level of protective parenting, isn't it? Oh, don't climb that tree. I mean, I want to talk to you about this electricity. We'll get to that. We'll come back to that. We're going to have to take a quick break. But I do want to hear from you on this. I really worry about kids being on their phones, what they're seeing. I worry about what adults are doing on their phones and what they're seeing. I mean, and certainly the porn, the violence, the pro-anorexia, self-harming, the pro-trans, sort of cut off your boobs and your bits and take puberty blockers because that'll make you happy all of a sudden. I think all of that stuff is incredibly dangerous. But is a TV 9 p.m. style TV watershed going to be the difference to this or not? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Up next, we're going to talk to a former advisor to President Zelensky. Is it Zelensky who is at fault for there not being peace in Ukraine? I wonder what his answer is going to be. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram's still here. We'll get his thoughts on what my next guest has to say. He's Igor Novikov. He's a former advisor to President Zelensky and joins us to talk about, well, the latest peace talks that apparently aren't going as well as Donald Trump wants them to be. A very good morning to you, Igor.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Well, Donald Trump has, I'd say quite extraordinarily, blamed President Zelensky, your president, for derailing his peace plan by refusing to accept the loss of Crimea. He says Zelensky is prolonging the killing, and in a very long Truth Social posting, he says, I will say I think Russia is ready. We have to get a deal with Russia. We have to get a deal with Zelensky. I thought, he says, it might have been easier to deal with Zelensky, but so far it's been harder. But that's okay. I think we have a deal with both. I hope they do it. He said the statement that Zelensky made today, and that was the Zelensky statement saying that he would not accept the loss of Crimea, will do nothing but prolong the killing field. And he said, we're close to a deal, but the man with no cards to play, he says of Zelensky, should now finally get it done. Is Zelensky the problem?
I don't think he is, and I can explain it to you. Two things I want to tell you. First of all, as you might know, Russia killed scores of civilians in central Kiev with ballistic missiles tonight. Yeah. Now, I'm not even going to evaluate that and, the human side of things on that. What I'm going to tell you is imagine the other scenario. Imagine Ukraine striking Moscow with ballistic missiles and killing civilians. What would Trump say?
Yeah.
And why doesn't he say the same thing about Putin? Because it's very convenient. Putin keeps killing civilians, but Zelensky is the problem that stands in the way of ending this war, which is just ridiculous if you think about it. And, I don't even want to comment on that stupidity. By the way, I commend you for actually reading, his tweets from Truth Social with a straight face. I mean,
I thought I did very well.
Punctuation alone is very difficult.
Donald Trump's claims in this post, you've got a choice. You can either lose Crimea now, you can fight for another 3 years. He keeps talking, doesn't he, about the meat grinder of human loss, and that you'll lose the whole of Ukraine in 3 years' time. Is that the choice?
No, I don't think it is the choice. I mean, look, I said it yesterday during one of my TV appearances. I'm going to repeat it today. In layman's terms, what Trump wants is the following. First of all, he wants Ukraine to surrender, unconditionally surrender and say Russia won. Secondly, he wants the world to praise him for ending this war and saving the world. That's the second thing he wants. The third thing he wants is to trade with Putin and make lots of money, lift the sanctions and everything. Now, Ukraine, for all its trouble, gets the privilege of giving him 50% of its future economy, for all of this, and we'll have to be thankful and grateful and wear suits. In essence, that's what he wants. I mean, are you surprised at all that it's not going the way he planned?
Well, this is the thing. We've seen, Steve Witkoff, his envoy and, of course, golfing buddy, is planning a fourth trip to see Vladimir Putin, has still not met with President Zelensky, extraordinarily, even though he's supposed to be, the man trying to bring about and broker this peace. I have to say, when I did read this, the 7-point plan from the US and Donald Trump's Truth Social posting, genuinely, they could have been written, both of them, by the Kremlin in terms of Kremlin talking points on this. Why do you think that Donald Trump takes this stance? Yeah, OK, he wants a mineral deal. He wants it in Ukraine. He wants to do a deal with Vladimir Putin of some sort. He wants to be seen as the peacemaker. He said he was going to make peace. He said he'd do it on day one. Hasn't happened yet. He said it was going to be this week. It's not going to happen this week. He's desperate to get that deal and can. But do you think that's all that is motivating him? Or do you think there is something more sinister here?
There is something more sinister, but I don't think it's what everyone thinks. I don't think he's a Russian agent, although Mr. Witkoff might be familiar with the surname Blavatnik, a certain Russian oligarch. I don't know, maybe Google it. But as far as President Trump is concerned, it's very, very simple. Have you ever seen a bully somebody who's stronger than him? No. The bullies always bully the weak. It's the way it works. Now, there's absolutely nothing he can get from Putin by being strong. Absolutely nothing. Now, he's pledged everything to ending this war. And the only option for him is to bully the weak into an unconditional surrender. That's what's going on here. He's desperate to get Ukraine to surrender. He's desperate to give up on Europe. He wants that kind of tug of war with China, and he wants to be friends with Putin and make lots of money with him. It's as simple as that. Don't overread it. Don't overcomplicate Trump's strategy. There is none.
What do you make of, and we had a caller earlier, Ian, and I see this all over the internet. Look, Crimea is Russian. It's been Russian before. It's got Russian speakers. Many in the Donbass region that are still under Russian control. They wanted to be Russian. It was Putin that came in and rescued them. And it is the West's fault. It is NATO's fault. It is the EU's fault and Zelensky's fault for basically posing this threat to Russia that, almost forced him to go in and rescue the Russian-speaking people in Ukraine. This seems to be one of the arguments that's being put about on the internet. Seems to be an argument that Donald Trump has read and has been convinced by. What do you make of that, and what's your rebuttal to that?
Well, it's incredibly simple. I mean, Russia is being. I've been studying disinformation for 20 years, so I know what I'm talking about. And Russia's been trying to divide the Ukrainian people for decades now. And the language issue is one of those issues. Now, a lot of Ukrainians have actually fallen for it, either pro-Ukrainian language or pro-Russian language, and so on and so forth. So that line of divide has appeared. But the way it works, if it weren't for the Russian-speaking population, if everyone spoke Ukrainian, Putin would go in to protect the bold, the ugly, the short, anyone. Think of it. People wearing falling in reverse T-shirts. I mean, like, he would find somebody to protect because he wants the land and he wants the resources. He doesn't care about the people. He's killed more Russian-speaking Ukrainians than the Nazis in the 40s. That's as simple as that.
Yeah. That's a very fair point. Where does this end? How does this end, though? Because one thing I do agree with Donald Trump on, we do want, you know, the meat grinder of young men being killed. I mean, again, even those who were in uniform on the Russian side and the Ukrainian side are conscripts who don't want to be there. They, you know, want to be back in their homes with their families, living a normal life. Plus the civilian deaths as well. We've got the children who've been abducted. We want that all to end. How does it come to an end if the US will not force Vladimir Putin to, at the very least, well, provide a guarantee to Ukraine that the Ukrainian territory right now can at least be protected with a 100% security guarantee from the West? If the US won't force Putin back, how does this end?
Well, do you want me to be incredibly frank about it? There are three possible scenarios. That's it. There's nothing else. Three realistic scenarios. One, Donald Trump doesn't blow it now by being too weak against Putin, and Putin will kind of pause the war. I'm not saying end the war, but pause the war. And I think if we have enough security guarantees, that might deter him for some time. So that could happen within the next few months. That's kind of scenario number one. Scenario number two, which is plausible but less realistic, is when Donald Trump actually grows a pair, pushes back against Putin, and then this war ends really quickly. Trust me, because the US does have leverage over Russia. It does. But unfortunately, that's less realistic. And the third option, which is ironically the most realistic one right now and the most ridiculous at the same time, is that Donald Trump blows it, exits negotiations, China steps in, sorts it out, goodbye the US.
In what way China steps in?
Well, if there's a vacancy for a mediator for a global superpower because the former superpower's president is not smart enough or strong enough to police the world, there will always be other
someone will step in, and we saw that in Syria, didn't we, when the West didn't step in. I mean, I do think the strongest argument here is certainly that what Donald Trump is doing is so massively undermining America's role as a superpower. It's humiliating for Donald Trump. It's humiliating for the American people right now that this is what is happening, and frankly making the state of America a laughing stock around the world.
Julia, well, I have one last thing to say to you. I mean, I've been reading Twitter replies and everything every single time we speak. And, there are obviously Russian bots, but there are a lot of British people whom I love. I've lived in Britain for 11 years, so I love this country. It's my second home. Although I haven't been back since, but still I consider it my second home. They seem to be pro-Trump and pro-Putin. Now, Donald Trump has disrespected Britain yesterday by not sending Rubio.
Yeah.
By not sending everyone else. He's disrespected Britain many times. J.D. Vance has disrespected British soldiers who died in Iraq, who died in all the other stupid American wars. And yet you keep praising that guy. You keep supporting him. Respect yourselves, because Britain is a superpower in waiting if you're strong enough to actually believe in yourselves. If you're not, if you're going to praise other people's stupid authoritarian leaders, I'm not saying Trump particularly here, well, you're not different from Russia.
Fascinating. Igor Novikov, former advisor to President Zelensky, thank you very much indeed. Love to hear your response to what he had to say there. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Philip Ingram, you were nodding along to a lot of that. What do you want to say?
Oh, I agree with everything Igor says, and there's some interesting things in there. Donald Trump saying that Ukraine will lose in 3 years' time. No, in 3 years' time, Ukraine will have set the conditions for Russia to collapse. But by about 18 months' time, Russia cannot replace the equipment that it's losing. It'll have used all of its stocks up and will be wholly reliant on military.
But also, if America starts pumping oil out and gas out, and pushes down that price, it's the only thing keeping the Russian economy afloat.
And the second thing is, and this is something that I've been bringing out in commentary for a little while now, and yesterday I did even more, was China stepping in.
Yeah.
China, a permanent member of the Security Council of the United Nations, a growing military force. It wants to get a global military presence so it can get military experience. Xi Jinping could pull a masterstroke by saying he will come in and provide a force for a buffer zone on the Russian side.
I vote no.
Well,
I vote no.
Exactly. Putin might say yes. Zelensky, if he's got any sense, would say no, because Europe would say no. But I can see that being tabled at some stage as a possibility.
The key thing is like what Europe does now, and the fact that we can't even protect, a nation state in our own continent without the US help tells you quite a lot. We need to build up our national resources and our defence ability, and we need to. I think we need to be on a war footing right now. Russia's on a war footing.
Yep.
China's on a war footing. China's spending 8% of its GDP and of its massive GDP on military.
But again, comparing GDPs, Russia's GDP is $22 trillion. Europe's GDP without the UK is over $200 trillion.
So it doesn't have to be the same thing. But we need stuff that works. We don't have enough. We literally don't have enough of anything. We need to be functioning.
It hasn't been invested in defence and security, and it needs to be.
Absolutely.
And that's part of Trump's beef. Europe hasn't invested
and he's
in
quite
that.
and he's quite right again.
Right in that.
Quite right on that. But he is so and he's so right on the Middle East and dealing with Iran, all that. He's so right on all of that. I just can't understand why he gets it so wrong on Ukraine. I just want to sort of grab him by the lapels and just shake him and say how wrong he's got this. But you know what? If America won't step up on this, then I'm sorry, Europe has to. If it's going to have to be Britain, it's going to have to be Britain, because we need to protect the European democracies from Russian dictators. I just don't know why anyone thinks that's a complicated conversation. I know a lot of you do, though, because I can already see you on the phone lines. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. 11:46 is the time. This is Talk.
Unbelievably, as we watch it get worse, it's still better than where they're coming from. Unfortunately. But he doesn't need to reclaim the flag. He doesn't. Of course, it might not surprise you to know that when he had his little soiree in Downing Street, the soiree for celebrating St George's Day. This was last night. There's some footage of him walking up the stairs in Downing Street with Mrs Starmer, who hasn't been seen for a very long time. They've obviously decided that we better put some form of pictorial evidence out that she's still with him, because otherwise people will start talking.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Philip Ingram still with me. Let's get to your calls and your texts and your messages coming in on various different topics. First of all, on social media. as the government is considering social media curfews similar to the 9 p.m. TV watershed for children. I want to know, will this actually tackle the harmful impact of social media on kids, or do we need to rely on other things? I mean, I don't know, things like parenting. Lucy says, it's not the government's responsibility to do this. It's the job of parents to monitor their offspring's social media usage, except, Lucy, most parents don't and don't even know how to, and most kids do know how to get around it. That is the reality. Ralph says, if you're asking what I think, then I think that the government has more important issues to tackle. What obsession have they got with taking over parents' responsibilities? I'll never know. It is extraordinary, isn't it, Philip, how often the government's solution to every single problem is a ban on something or more controls. James says, we know the game now. Past what seems to be good laws, wait a while, then extend those laws to go after British people. It's a serious concern of mine that any law that protects children means that children have to be identified as children on social media use, at which point you have to also identify that people are adults and not children. And at that point, everyone's got to sign in. Now, you and I were discussing this just before the show, and this is, I say, it was a major concern of mine. But we actually have a much sort of easier. It's much easier for people to sort of be anonymous in British society than and not be formally ID'd than in pretty much any other country, even in Europe.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why organised crime gangs are happy to use the UK. I've lived in Germany, I've lived in the Netherlands, I've gone through Belgium, France, and all the rest of it. To get a mobile phone number, to get a SIM card, you have to produce some form of identity with your address on it, and it is registered to you. Over here, you can buy it in the supermarket. Nobody cares. Nobody knows, and that's just the basis of it. Germany, you have to register where you live within 3 months of moving into the place, so that with a local council equivalent, otherwise you're committing a criminal offence, and you do not get access to it.
Well, here's the thing, they've got all these other laws and you have to carry an identity card with you all the time. It's a crime not to. I've been in Germany living there and didn't have my passport on me, and I was threatened by the police. I'll go and get it. I hadn't realised that was the law. They've got all these laws, and yet they've still got the same issue with things like illegal migration and massive levels of crime. They've still got the same problem. So we're told often, if we brought in these rules, whether it's social media content for kids and all this, everyone being identified as social media, adults or kids, if we brought all that in, we'd all be safer. Except where it does exist, it doesn't seem to make anyone safer.
But this is where the EU bit comes in. The illegal migration that there is across Europe. Angela Merkel opened up the EU and brought it all in through there. Italy wouldn't want it in, and most other countries wouldn't want it in. But what it allows individuals, or allows the countries to do, is identify these individuals very quickly.
Well, great, identify them. They can't get rid of them.
Well, they are getting rid of them. You look at France. If you get someone that
putting them on dinghies over here
says something anti-France, and they're putting a plane straight back to their country or to a third-party country.
Yeah. My worry is whenever, and again, like one of our messages said, whenever people talk about making it more safe for us, I always just think, I've been told about government making things safe and doing things for safety and doing things for children, and I don't think it ever works out well for the rest of us. But anyway, let's go to the phone lines. 0344 499 1000. John is in Brighton. John, you wanted to comment on this?
Yes. Good morning to you, Julia. First time caller.
Oh, thank you very much for calling them. What do you want to say?
Right. Well, I think this flipping watershed is well out of date. I mean, when you think when the TV watershed actually came in, we had 3 channels.
Yeah.
Now we've got 650. And as I was saying to your researcher, all I've got to do now is, if I wanted to, is click on Netflix, and I can watch some of the most 18-rated stuff out there.
Yeah.
And of course, going back to when I was a kid, I bang on about this all the time. The only way we communicated was 3 minutes on the phone on the landline.
Yeah. In the hallway, in a cold hallway, sitting on the stairs. Yeah.
That's it. And a CB radio.
Yeah. Well, we saw people in real life. Amazing, wild idea.
I know.
Do you think the watershed isn't the solution? Because kids are going to... Well, they're going to find a way round it anyway, aren't they? Who are we kidding?
Of course it's not. I mean, the thing is, the problem is we should have seen this coming years ago. As soon as the apps came in and started drifting in, we should have seen what was coming. But we didn't. We sat back and we said, oh, never mind, it'll be all right. But we don't, like everything, Julia, even when youngsters have kids now, they don't think before going to bed. They think, oh, all right, jump in bed, everything's done, right? They don't think about the future.
I think a lot of us did that in the past as well. I just think there's an element where, you know, when mobile phones came in, they were work tools, they were social tools. We spoke to people, and then the text messaging, and then people got smartphones. By the time adults realised how damaging smartphones were for the younger kids, they were already addicted themselves. But what amazes me is how many kids in primary school have got smartphones, like 7-year-olds with smartphones. What the hell does a 7-year-old need a phone for?
Well, exactly. I remember, as I said, you know, if Mum didn't like who I was talking to on the CB, she turned it off.
Happy days. No, I mean, that's the thing, but also parents aren't around as much anymore. That's the other thing. And when they are around, they're on their own phones. John, thank you so much for calling. Do please call in again. Let's go to another call now. Jules is in Bedford. And Jules, you wanted to talk about Zelensky and Trump blaming Zelensky for the ongoing war.
Yeah, hi, Julia.
Hi.
I agree with 99.9% of everything you say about every subject.
But
there's one aspect of what Trump said yesterday which I think we may disagree about, and that is this. He described, I think correctly, as Zelensky as the man with no cards, because the reality on the ground is that day by day, little by little, Ukraine is losing. Russia is gaining territory.
No, they're not. No, Russia isn't gaining territory, and Ukraine isn't. Russia has been in Ukraine for over almost 3.5 years.
Yeah. I know.
They haven't won.
I know that. I'm well aware of that. But according to the Institute of Study of War, very slowly, not in every area, but in some areas, the front line is being pushed back by Russia. And I reckon that, and I say this as a former defence analyst, by the way, I reckon that given more time, there's one school of thought says that Putin's army is going to crumble, and another says that it's not. I don't think we have enough evidence to say that it's going to crumble to bet the house on it, and I think that's Trump's point.
No, but the point is, I mean, Ukraine would be doing better if they were getting the support from the US. They didn't have that, that sudden freeze for a period of time without getting aid. All of the aid that's gone to Ukraine has come too little, too late during this war. Yes. If America and the West upped their game and gave them all the help they could, they could end this war tomorrow if they really wanted to. They could end the war tomorrow simply by providing a security guarantee for the existing remaining Ukraine state and saying, Russia, we freeze those lines, not an inch more from Vladimir Putin, and we will recognise de facto, but not legally, that Russia is now controlling that territory. Zelensky's basically agreed to that as long as he gets a security guarantee. He's not the problem. He does have cards to play. You know what his card is to play? His card is that he's got the Ukrainian people behind him who want to carry on fighting to protect their country.
Well, I mean, maybe, yeah. Do we know that for sure? I don't know.
Well, the polling seems pretty clear. Yeah, it does actually.
Yeah, I honestly don't trust polls during wartime. And,
okay, no, that is a fair point. But there's no evidence. There's no evidence to the contrary. You could equally argue.
No, I think you're absolutely right. But what we've discovered in the West, and one of the reasons why we're not sending more stuff to Ukraine, not all of the reasons,
we haven't got any.
Yeah, exactly. We're running out of kit, and if you look at the number of, say, for example, massive ordnance penetrator bombs the Americans have, it's in 2 digits. They don't necessarily have huge stockpiles either, and they don't know when China's going to go for Taiwan. So I think that is one of their calculations, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah, no, I definitely think there is a global issue there. And unfortunately, and I know Philip Ingram backs me up on this, actually the message that's being sent out to Xi Jinping of China is fill your boots, do what you want. Even if we did act to defend Taiwan, it wouldn't be for more than a few years. Jules, so appreciate your call. Thank you very much. I know Philip Ingram is desperate to get in. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I agree with some of what Jules has said, but what he's talking about in the front line is right in one part. The Russians are making small advances in a certain area, but the Ukrainians are making advances themselves in the area of Pokrovsk, which Russia's been fighting for. So effectively, there's a stalemate in the front line. Yeah. The thing that commentators and analysts are getting wrong is this war is not going to be won on what's happening on the front line in the east. It's going to be won or lost at what is described as the operational level. So the activity to continue to sustain the war. Ukraine is winning in that at the moment by destroying more Russian kit and destroying Russians' wherewithal inside Russia to support it. The EU needs to step up to support Ukraine. Ukraine can now cover most of the bill that it needs to continue the fighting. So actually Ukraine's in a stronger
They're
position.
manufacturing an awful lot of their weaponry themselves. But here's the thing, you know, Russia is so much of a bigger country. So much. I always do this around midday. So much of a bigger country, bigger economy, bigger, you know, access to soldiers, and yet they're winning.
Well, they're not winning, and they're actually, I would argue, losing, because the analogy that I use is you look at Vietnam. The Americans say they won every tactical battle. The Viet Cong said, so what?
Yeah, absolutely.
They won the war.
Absolutely. I'm hoping the voice, I do apologise. I have had this cough for about 6 months now, haven't I? Mm-hmm. It's getting very tedious. I mean, he's amazingly not caught it over all these months of sitting in the same studio as me. Apologies for the sound effects, everybody. Coming up, we're going to talk to Labour's James Mathewson about electricity bills going up for the South, whether the Prime Minister should actually apologise for his Chancellor ideology, you name it. Plenty more besides, and more on social media, and plenty more besides. Do keep in touch. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's 2 minutes past 12 o'clock, and you're very welcome to join us, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. Either way, great to have your company. Great also to have the company of Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, who is also joining us throughout the show. Lots more to talk about over the next hour before we hand over to Ian Collins at 1 o'clock. First up, we are going to be talking about households in the south facing paying more for electricity under plans that are being considered by the Net Zero and Energy Secretary Ed Miliband. The move would lead to prices being determined by supply and demand in each area, in each region. So Scotland would benefit from greater wind supplies, fewer people. Well, at that point, of course, they could have lower prices. Isn't this not penalising, though, the southern softies like me who need the heating on even in June? We'll be talking about that with Labour's James Mathewson in just a few moments. Plus, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves has confirmed that a youth mobility scheme for 18 to 30-year-olds in the EU and the UK to go and live in each other's countries would allow Europeans to temporarily live and work in the UK. They're saying that is being discussed with the EU. The question is, of course, is where if they could do it for under a year, it wouldn't show up in the immigration figures. We could all pretend that those people who are actually living in our country aren't here. Really? Plus, Donald Trump, as we know, we've been talking, has blamed Ukraine's Zelensky for derailing his peace plan. The US president said that Mr. Zelensky was prolonging the killing and has warned Kyiv to accept US demands or risk a complete Russian takeover. We're going to be talking to the chairman of Republicans Overseas, Greg Swenson, about the American side of that debate. Plus, as we've been discussing all morning, lots of your messages coming in on social media. Interestingly, already on this, children could face a social media curfew under plans being considered by the government. The Digital Secretary, Peter Kyle, said he was examining the online equivalent of a TV watershed, the 9 p.m. advert and TV watershed for children, after concerns that the addictive nature of social media was disrupting sleep, family life and other aspects of their lives and mental health. We'll talk about all of that, plenty more besides. Let's go straight to my first guest then, James Mathewson. He's a former Labour Party spokesman and official and joins us right now. A very good afternoon to you, James.
Hello, Julia.
Thank you very much. Oh, that was a weary. Oh, I know how this is going to go.
No,
I heard that.
I promise it wasn't.
I heard the tone there. Anyway, James, look, thank you so much for joining. Always good to talk to you. Can we just talk about this apparent plan being considered by Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary? He was asked about it in the social media around today, about households in different regions being subject to different pricing depending on, wind generation and other things in their local areas. So it would mean in the south we've got a lot more people and not as many, wind turbines and the like, that actually we could end up in the south, where I am right now, paying more for our electricity than someone, say, in Scotland, where you've got plenty of wind turbines. How is that fair?
Yeah, it's an interesting way for the story to be presented, and I think this comes from the Sun newspaper, where it's been kind of predominantly ran today, because initially the idea behind this programme is to address long-held concerns in parts of the country, especially areas like Scotland, where, a lot of the independence campaign had a lot of energy behind it, forgive the pun, from, issues like this, where they said, we produce a lot of stuff and we don't get the benefit of it. We don't see the benefit of it. Of course, I believe that devolution does deal out a fair deal to Scotland. However, there are people in other parts, regions, counties of England. I'm from Northumberland. It's one of the biggest counties in England. Generates a lot of energy because of its wind turbine capacity. And people who have to live near these things, because obviously of, the problem of NIMBYism and all the rest of it, lots of people get frustrated living near energy infrastructure. And the idea is to try and give them some discount. And it's not about trying to, lower costs across the board for everyone. It's just about trying to give a discount to people who have to endure living near in energy.
I'm all in favour of that. Like, if you want to, if people are going to be disrupted by a new airport runway or electricity generation, nuclear power plant, anything, I'm all for local people getting a discount in their bills for that. That seems to me to be very reasonable. That's, basically paying them for the disruption. But that's not what this story is about. This story is quite clearly about actually having these, energy supplies being paid for on a different basis. And we're always told on this basis, we'll all end up paying less. Same reason. Have a smart meter, you'll end up paying less for your electricity. On the contrary, these are about the ability to have price surging, aren't they? I mean, it just doesn't seem to be reasonable. I mean, okay, Scotland, they might produce more of the wind power on the occasional days when it's windy and we don't have to rely on gas to produce our electricity. But actually, the south produces most of the wealth in this country. So, and we don't get the benefit of that. We're paying loads of taxes. So why should the south have to pay more for the electricity?
Well, you can produce all the wealth you like and not have the power on, Julia. But,
we could do both. It's what other first world countries managed to do, James.
I think this is an attempt, whether you believe cynically or otherwise, in the Labour Party, in Ed Miliband's department.
No, I don't.
Especially this attempt to try and address regional disputes, north-south divides, all the rest of it. But of course, the PR today is not what they would have wanted from it, because it just exacerbates that now.
Do you know what would help the North and the Midlands and Scotland? Is bring back manufacturing. You can only do that if you've got cheap and affordable, plentiful, reliable, secure energy. And you need fossil fuels for that. And Ed Miliband is opposed to that.
Well, no, I think, I've long held the view that there could be a green industrial revolution.
I know, God bless you.
Across swathes of the north. We
God
could
bless
be
you for that.
Building EVs and building all those
brilliant.
things in our community.
We could absolutely build electric vehicles cheaper than the Chinese can do, with cheap slave labour and fossil fuel, coal-powered factories. We could absolutely do that.
I mean, the thing is,
you're living in cloud cuckoo land.
There's premium markets. There's all sorts of markets with energy. But those communities that are, like the ones that I come from in Northumberland, where they were devastated after the closing of the pits, after the closing of, the fossil fuel industries that kept those communities alive. They should have been transitioned. If we believed in green energy as much as we believe in fossil fuels, then we would show that by giving the investment in those communities and letting them build them.
Well, you wouldn't have to give the investment because companies would be wanting to set up their factories because it was affordable and possible to do, but they don't because it's not. Because our industrial prices are 4 times that of America and 50% more than that in the rest of Europe.
Well, coal mines were subsidised for a long time,
I find this very strange about the Labour Party. The sort of the lauding of coal miners, as this wonderful job. Yeah, let's pay men to work underground in horrific conditions and die at the age of 60 from the lung condition. I mean, yeah, what a great life that was. We should absolutely.
You don't need to tell me. You don't need to tell me. I mean, that's the last thing I want to do.
Thank God we don't have men down the pit anymore. Thank God.
Yeah, I'm pleased. It's just the transition and the way that it happened, Julia, as you know, it could have been done a lot.
There's something in between sending men down the pit and asking the wind to blow on days when it doesn't blow and hoping that it does. Right, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about something which was very much in the Labour manifesto about there was going to be no return to, to the EU and to free movement. Labour was very, very clear about that, but what a surprise. The former shadow Brexit secretary who spent the best part of 4 years trying to stop Brexit from happening after that 2016 vote. What a surprise. A little bit of movement by the back door. We've already got this idea of having sort of dynamic alignment with EU standards on agriculture and other goods and basically being a rule taker, not part of being the rule maker. But also it's now been confirmed by Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, that there is this plan that being looked at as part of deals with EU for a closer relationship to allow 18 to 30-year-olds from EU to come and live and work in the UK and from the UK to go and live and work in the EU. This is simply freedom of movement by the back door, isn't it?
No, I think it's it's the idea of new schemes. And this was the thing with Brexit. Like, we've had Brexit, we've had that situation brought in. Everything, or well, not everything, perhaps everybody wanted the Brexiteers wanted happened. But you had Brexit supporting governments. The government still in principle supports being outside of the EU and the bloc.
In principle.
But of course, at the same time, there are always going to be new plans and new ideas and new schemes. This is a new one, so it should be considered as such. There are lots of people calling out for it. It has merits. If I was a young person, I would certainly support it. Not that I'm not a young person, but if I was one of these young people,
sort of. But again, we know. But those are the people who were travelling over from Eastern European countries to get work here. Now there's some talk that the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper is saying, well, you make these visas for basically less than a year. Because then if it's less than a year, it doesn't have to count as an immigration statistic. But you're still talking about, let's face it, there are more people who want to come here for work from Europe than the sons and daughters of the well-to-do Islington dinner party class, whose children want to go and have a nice little job working in an Italian cafe or wherever for a year. I mean, that's the reality. Is actually this will still mean young people coming to this country from abroad, competing with our young people in terms of getting those starter jobs, in terms of a lot of jobs in hospitality and elsewhere, and that is going to be an issue for our young people.
I don't believe so, and I don't think it's competition. I mean, on my street alone, I've got 4 pubs. Every single one of them has got a big sign out the front at the moment, desperate. They're desperate for people to come and work and come and pull pints because they haven't got anyone. And that's a university city. Edinburgh's a university city, so you've got plenty of students kicking about. Of course, those students, when they're wealthier, they don't tend to want to work. And look, I get your point about, the Islington elite and all the rest of it. But I know people who, were from very limited means, who had a great time going in interrailing in Europe. It helped them develop in their careers in many ways.
You can do that. No, but you can do that now.
Yeah, but it's about just opening that up.
You can go to the EU for up to 6 months, not a problem.
Yeah, but it's about creating other opportunities in the other direction as well. We need those people.
Well, it's not. No, it's not the job of Labour government to help the people of Romania or Poland or Germany. Or that's not their job.
It's about helping us. It's about helping our industry. About helping those 4 pubs on my street.
Well, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. Why don't we, first of all, instead of bringing in people, cheap labour from abroad, because presumably if those jobs paid well enough, people would want to take them. Why don't we make sure that people will take those jobs in those pubs? Because frankly, they're not entitled to benefits if they're not working.
Yeah. The thing is, Julia, if you make work mandatory in that sense, or force somebody into a role and take away their choice altogether, that's called slavery. It's not called.
No, it's not. No, it's not. We're not. I wouldn't force anyone to go and do that job or that pub to hire that particular person. I'd simply say, hello, young person who apparently thinks they don't have to work. We know like 1 in 8 people are basically are long-term sick, apparently, under the age of, I think, 24. I'm sorry. We've got so many people who are leaving education, who haven't got a job, aren't in training. They need to be working. A benefit shouldn't be an option, and they will take a job and they will turn up on time when there is no other option. And we need to. I mean, if parents aren't going to teach those skills and schools aren't teaching those skills, life will teach them those skills.
Wow.
And instead of just saying we'll just pay taxes to have millions of our own people sitting on the sofa all day, not contributing, we'll import people from abroad. That doesn't do anyone any good.
I mean, you won't be surprised to know I disagree.
Why do you disagree though? Why do you want our young people left on the scrap heap?
They're not left on the scrap heap.
Yeah, they are.
It's about choice, and if they're choosing
choice,
this and you know, many of them and choice and also not choice. You know, we talk about mental health, we talk about these issues. It's far more complex than just
everyone's got a mental health problem now. No, they don't know. No, you can choose to do absolutely bugger all day, but you don't do it on my dime. If you want to not be a contributor, I think you're immoral. I think people who are able-bodied are immoral for not working. But if you're choosing to do it, I choose not to pay taxes to pay for you to not do it.
That's down to your definition, your idea of who is deemed acceptable to work or not. And
what do you mean who's deemed acceptable to work or not? Do you genuinely believe that more young men and women aged in their early 20s right now, today, are unable to work than say, in the 1960s? Are you kidding me?
No, but it's it's just that those people in the 1960s didn't have the choice and were forced into it.
Didn't have the choice. Sorry. You. Let's just back up here, James. As a former Labour Party spokesman, are you seriously telling me that you think that able-bodied young adults should have the choice about whether to go to work to pay their bills or to sit at home and ask other people who do go to work to pay their bills? Are you saying that should be a legitimate legal choice for people in this country?
It should be a legitimate legal choice to choose whether you prioritise your health. And mental health is not separate from physical health. It's the same thing.
By the way, all the evidence shows that actually work is very good for people, so you actually want to prioritise people's mental health.
That's different for everyone, Julia. I mean,
pretty much across the board, that is actually very...
It is. Julia, I would always thank myself and thank my lucky stars that you're not in charge of the DWP and you don't get.
Oh, I tell you what, the nation would be thanking me every single day. They'd be coming up to me and shaking my hand if I was in charge of the DWP, mate.
Yeah.
Because their taxes would have gone down.
But I really do feel that compassion needs to be at the centre of this.
Compassion? No. You're talking about compassion for people who would rather sit on the sofa and expect other people to go to work, often in back-breaking work.
Who don't have a choice.
They don't have a choice.
No. I mean, if you're crippled with anxiety, if you're crippled with depression, if you've got
most people aren't crippled with anxiety or depression.
You've got complex trauma. If you've got various different issues,
okay.
We're trying to talk in the round about.
But you think that uniquely. So not only do more people suddenly in this day and age, in the 21st century, do more people and young people have those mental health problems than for instance, the men who fought in wars, people who survived under rationing. You think they have? No, it's not. And you think that we uniquely in this country have a bigger mental health problem that's totally legitimate than every other Western nation, because the stats are off the scale for our country. Yeah. Do you actually believe that is real?
I've seen the impact of a generation, i.e. yours, that grew up not taking its mental health seriously, not having access to therapy or services.
And then we just got on with it,
that,
mate.
That generation is ruined with
Is it?
You know,
I think we're much happier than younger people.
It's still continuing to pass on that trauma to their children and to their grandchildren now. You know, many of them have not dealt with their own stuff, with their own issues, and they're completely dysfunctional.
Okay, you can. Lots of people may have had childhood trauma, maybe dealing with stuff and anxiety, depression, but you know what? They still went out to work.
Great, lovely.
Yeah,
Because
great. Yeah, contributing, paying for their own kids, paying for themselves.
If I say to you, look, you can't afford to take today off, even though
lots of people can't afford to take today off.
Well, that's great, Joe, but that's not the world I want to live in. Respectfully, like I want to live in a world.
But if okay, James, if we all take today off because we're having a duvet day and don't feel great, if we're all taking the day off, who's paying for everything?
Not though, are we? We're not though, are we? You're saying that.
But you said we are. But you said we should all have the choice.
We should all have the choice, and we do all have the choice.
We don't. Mate, there are millions of people in this country who are not in staff jobs. They don't get paid if they don't turn up to work. There are people who turn up to work the day after, you know, their loved one dies, things like because they don't have the choice. And you're saying, wouldn't it be great if everyone had the choice all the time? But that's not how life works.
Oh, I know, but it can be, Julia, and that's what we're talking about here. We can move closer. I'm not talking about a utopia. I'm not talking about a world where no one works. I'm talking about a world where compassion.
Why would anyone? Why would look? I'm lucky. I do a job that I love doing. But I've done plenty of jobs that I didn't enjoy doing. Okay, so when I was chopping onions and garlic all day at a burger takeaway, and I was on a Saturday when I was a teenager, right? So if I had the option to go and do that and be paid whatever it was, 20 quid for the day or whatever it was, or not do it, but I could get paid to not do it because someone else would pay because I'd be on benefits. Which do you think I'd choose?
Are you seriously telling me that you would choose to work? So if you won the lottery tomorrow and you were in a manual labour job, right? You would choose to continue doing that manual labour job.
It's amazing how many people do. No, my point is, I wouldn't choose.
No, that's the problem with your generation.
But James, Julia. I'm just pointing out.
You've got this slavish obedience to your employers.
I'm renowned for that. Honestly, talk to my employers. I'm renowned for that.
Somehow, an ideological thing where you're like, work's the most important thing. Listen, I don't care.
No, actually, my family is the most important thing. But one of the reasons my family is important is I'm able to support them.
Great, but if you can support them through any other means, sometimes it's about working smarter than it is about working harder.
But James, my point was, you missed, James, you got the wrong end of the stick. I said, if someone's going to pay me 20 quid when I was 16 to chop onions all day, or 20 quid to sit on my backside all day, I'd gone sow on my backside all day. But if everyone makes that choice, no one's there chopping the onions and no one's doing anything else.
Everyone is making that choice. And this comes down to a fundamental question that we need to ask ourselves. Why do we want people to chop onions?
Because people want bunions on their burgers.
Great.
People want to buy burgers. No one's going to make the burgers. No one's going to have the money to buy the burgers. Our entire economy. Are we all going to go and live in caves?
You don't wake up as someone one day and go, do you know what it is? Do you know what my calling in life is? It's to provide someone with chopped onions for their burger.
But here's my thing.
I want to really go and help Julia Hartley-Brewer on our lunch break have a nice burger while she's sitting in a radio studio, you know? No one does that, Julia. Wake up. You have to realise
it's an example of a job which you were talking about manual labour. And by the way, I think quite disparaging. Who would continue in a manual labour job if they had the money and didn't? I know lots of people who do manual labour who are very proud of the jobs they do. And frankly, they're more essential personnel than you are and than I am in terms of keeping this country going. But this is the thing. This attitude, this idea that everyone should have the choice. It's all very well on a lovely summer's day. We all have the choice to not work, but someone's got to do stuff.
It's the basic principle that Nye Bevan came up with when he founded the NHS, and that was that if you are sick, if you are ill, if you are unable to work, and you still have to work,
they are able.
No civilized
they
society.
are. No, my point is they are able to work, unless you think we are uniquely mentally ill in this country.
That's your opinion, though.
No, it's not my opinion. Do you believe if we have stats that are off the scale for young people who claim to have mental health problems, they are out of kilter with every other Western nation? Do you think that is because A, we are uniquely mentally ill in this country, or B, young people are swinging the lead.
They're not swinging the lead. We need to look at the
So you think we are uniquely mentally ill in this country?
Look at the quality of life in this country. Look at the way things have been run. We had 15 years of austerity. We had absolute hopelessness in communities that were given nothing. You know, I mean, you think it's funny and you think I'm mad for it. I get it, all right? But I equally think you're insane for thinking that people
should go to work.
An entire generation of people just don't want to work, right? But if I've got anxiety, if I've got depression, I wake up in the morning, it's a struggle to stay alive. It's a struggle to not kill myself, frankly. I've got four friends who I went to school with who are all dead now, who've killed themselves.
That's horrific.
Right? That's horrific. It's an absolute crisis, right? If you wake up and that's the choice on the table, and you think, am I going to? Then of course, the whole world is.
I would say to you, and horrible to the four friends of yours have taken their lives. I would say that part of the problem in terms of the mental health that does actually exist, that is real, as opposed to the swinging the lead, and there is that, is actually the way we tackle the mental health issues these days, and actually the attitude that a lot of people like you have, which actually I think makes the problem worse, not better. I'm going to have to leave it there because I've got to go. I've got to talk to Philip. I've got to go to break. But Matthew, we didn't even get on to the Prime Minister at the PMQs yesterday. We haven't got there, but so appreciate you joining us. I am utterly flabbergasted, and if you could have seen Philip Ingram's face throughout that, everyone, it was an absolute picture. Where's to start, Philip?
Oh, great. Well, I'm going to start with the mental health bit because you know I've suffered. I've suffered from depression. I've suffered from PTSD. I didn't miss a day of work, so I feel insulted by what James was saying. That you have
Why
to
was
have
that
this...
important to you?
Because it gave me a focus. It gave me something to be able to continue to keep that front going that was keeping me alive. If I had been...
The structure, the purpose in life.
Exactly. If I had been having duvet days and been at home, I'd be dead. There's no two ways about that. I would have killed myself. James's attitude I do find insulting. When it comes to jobs and bits and pieces, let's look at Europe. And I keep talking about Germany, but that's because I lived there for 13 years. Germany. You go and sign on for benefits. They will give you a period of time that you're on benefits, and then they will send you off to the job centre to get jobs. You will get 3 job offers that are in there, and if you don't accept any of the 3 job offers, they then give you a job, and you have to attend it. It's only part-time, but you have to attend it to continue to get your benefits.
No, again, it's not. You talked about this being slavery. No, you can do what you want. You just don't have the right to do anything you want without someone else paying for it. Deep sighs. Lots of reaction. I know, we're all surprised. Lots of reaction coming into what James Matthewson had to say. And we'll get to those messages up next. Stay tuned, you don't want to miss this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
Unbelievably, as we watch it get worse, it's still better than where they're coming from, unfortunately. But, he doesn't need to reclaim the flag, he doesn't, of course, it might not surprise you to know that when he had his little soiree in Downing Street, the soiree for celebrating St George's Day, this was last night, there's some footage of him walking up the stairs in Downing Street with Mrs Starmer, who hasn't been seen for a very long time. They've obviously decided that we better put some form of pictorial evidence out that she's still with him, because otherwise people will start talking.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. What a lively chat that was with James Matthewson. I have to say, you think people are sensible, and then you can have lots of different political views on lots of different things, but the idea that like people should... Summary, if you're just tuning in, former Labour Party official spokesman James Mathewson telling us basically he thinks, I don't even know how we got onto this, he thinks that basically young people should have the right to not choose not to work.
Yeah,
I mean, that was the summary. Absolutely extraordinary. Your phone calls coming in thick and fast on this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to take part. Mike is in Warwickshire. Mike, keep it clean. What do you want to say?
Oh, right, OK.
But just, wow.
I find it very strange that a party that are telling us they're going to get young people into work are also saying it should be a choice. And therefore, what jobs are they going to produce that they'll want to choose to do?
Yeah.
Because they might not choose. I don't want to work in a factory. I don't want... Well, there's jobs I did that I didn't particularly want to do. But what I did is that when I did those jobs and earned me money, I looked for another job which would then suit me better.
But also, did the job to the best of your ability, because that actually helps you, helps you do... I did loads of temping jobs and things like secretarial, answering phones and things. Do it well, and people go, oh, actually, do you want to try doing this? And it gives you your own... I think no matter... Again, I stuffed envelopes, there's a cleaner. It gives you self-esteem to just do what you've been paid to do well. But also, by the way, you're not supposed to necessarily enjoy work. There's a reason why people pay you to do it and you don't volunteer to do it. It's because you might not necessarily enjoy it all the time.
So my question to these is, how low are they going to sink, right?
Yeah.
We've got a government who've got people who have known criminal convictions, people who are lying.
Yeah.
We've got people who have had to go abroad to answer charges. We got MPs who they put up and who beat people up in the street.
Yep.
And then if that's not enough, they lie constantly about heating for old age farmers. I mean, the list is endless. Then you get the buffoon the other day saying we're going to take back the flag, which they've been vilifying as a rally point for thugs and lunatics, for people who maybe beat people up in the street. Hang about, that's them, isn't it? Right, okay. So, at what point are they actually going to come out and say something worthwhile? We've got Rachel from Accounts, who is running the country into the dust at an unbelievable rate of knots. And I forecast this year there will be I've already seen a lot of job losses in what I do. That is going to accelerate. There's a lot of people I know who are in my age group who own businesses who are closing them down now.
And it's sort of, what's the point carrying on? Yeah.
What's the point? All I'm doing is peddling harder to pay more money out so that... And then when they decide, they bother to spend the squillions of pounds to go to court to decide that a bloke isn't a woman because he puts a frock on. The next thing they do is go, well, we better challenge this.
Yeah. Don't. I mean, no, officially the government has said, and the Scottish government as well, they're going to accept it, but behind the scenes, stuff going on. Mike, it was a wonderful summary. I wish most of our MPs and our political commentators could summarise as well as that, Mike. I so appreciate that. And again, I can hear the sort of utter bewilderment as well. David's on the line in Coventry. Hello, David.
Hi, Julia. James Mathewson is the archetypal socialist.
Yeah.
He wants to take your hard-earned tax money and give it away. It won't be his money. Now, if his house was sold and he was reduced to probably, I don't know, what an old age pensioner receives, and all of the money that he was that was taken away from him was spent on this nonsense that he's proposing, that would be fine. I'll go along with it, yeah. But he won't put his money in where his mouth is. He wants your money, your hard-earned taxpayers' pounds, and mine, and everyone else's that he wants to waste. The man is an utter disgrace.
I wouldn't use the word disgrace. I mean, you choose your words, obviously. But for me, it's just really sad because actually I think he thinks he's being kind. And a lot of people who share that attitude is that they're being kind. And actually, they're not. They're actually being cruel because actually a bit of tough love is better. And I've had friends who've said, my kids come back from uni or left school and they're not working and they're sitting on the sofa all day. And, and I'll say, well, tell them, you've got 3 weeks to find a job. The locks are going to be changed in 3 months' time because you're paying rent and that's it. And you have to just, you have to do that stuff. You have to do the right thing. And part of your job as a parent is raising a kid that can make a contribution. And again, I was raised embrace this view that, you know, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. We can only help the people who've got genuinely serious, you know, mental health crises or serious physical disabilities if we've got the money to help them. If people who haven't got those are contributing and working, it's a moral duty.
Absolutely. My first job, I was working for a parks department, a local authority parks department, only for 4 months, and then until I was old enough to join the job that I joined and really loved, which was the fire service.
Brilliant. Yeah.
But what I learnt when I was working for the parks department, a job which I didn't detest, I didn't hate, but it certainly wouldn't have been my choice of a career. I learnt a huge amount of about gardening, landscaping, and all that sort of thing, which I've used in later life.
No, but these are all. But there's life skills about dealing with people, about turning up on time, appropriately attired, how you know, just basic life skills. I mean, I think I learnt more waitressing than I did in any journalistic job in terms of about people. You know,
dealing with people because you meet you meet all forms of people, all types of people, all stratas of society.
Absolutely.
From the very nice to the absolutely
appalling. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. No, exactly. I just think it's really, I think the idea, that's how it started, bringing in a whole load of young people from the EU to do the jobs that our young people don't want to do. Again, I'm sure you agree with me, and Mike does as well. I'm pretty sure Philip Ingram as well. It's not a question whether you want to, you're going to have to. And people say, well, I don't want to employ these young people from Britain because they haven't got the right attitude. When they're hungry enough, they'll have the right attitude. David, thank you for your call. We're going to take another quick break. Up next, we're going to talk to Greg Swenson from Republicans Overseas. Going to find out his opinion, his thoughts on Donald Trump blaming not Putin, but Zelensky for the failure of a peace deal in Ukraine. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram still with me as well. Let's return to the issue of Ukraine. Are we going to get a peace deal in Ukraine? I mean, it was supposed to be signed on day one, back on, was it January the 20th, wasn't it, by Donald Trump? That's what he pledged before the election as a Republican candidate. Now he's been talking about it's going to be this week. Not looking very close. He's got a 7-point plan, which frankly could have been written by the Kremlin. And yesterday, in a very long post on his Truth social media site, he blamed Zelensky, not Putin, who, by the way, bombed the hell out of Kyiv, killing 10 people and injuring dozens last night, all civilians, by the way. He blames Zelensky for the failure to come to the table and says, basically, you can either come to the table and cede Crimea and admit that Crimea, in his views, is Russian now, or you can lose the whole of Ukraine in the next 3 years. So what does Greg Swenson make of that? He's the chairman of Republicans Overseas UK. Very good afternoon to you, Greg.
Hello, Julia.
Hello, thanks for joining us. Is Donald Trump right in blaming Zelensky rather than Putin for the failure of peace talks for Ukraine?
Yeah, I don't know that he's blaming Zelensky. In fact, the White House is running ads on Fox News, your cousin station here in the U.S. He's been running ads blaming Putin and being very critical of Putin, talking about the peace proposal. So, I think this is just, maybe he doesn't find that the criticism from Zelensky, doesn't find that productive or constructive at this time. in the negotiations that are going on in London. But I do think that he's just trying to get to the end game.
Sorry,
just getting to the outcome.
This is one of the things. Now I know again, you weren't sort of a Trump fanatic at all. We talked many times ahead of the choice of the Republican candidate, but who you and I would prefer. But yeah, we supported him for the actual election as the better of the two choices. But again, it's the failure of people in America on the right to actually even admit that what is before us in black and white. In his Truth Social statement, he said as she says, the statement made by Zelensky today, basically not accepting that Crimea is Russian, because it's not. The statement made by Zelensky today will do nothing but prolong the killing field, and nobody wants that. We are very close to a deal, but the man with no cards to play, meaning Zelensky, should now finally get it done. Then, speaking in the Oval Office last night, he said it was Ukraine that was making peace talks difficult rather than Russia. He said, I will say that I think Russia is ready. We have to get a deal with Russia. We have to get a deal with Zelensky. I thought it might have been easier to deal with Zelensky, but so far it's been harder, but that's okay. I think we have a deal with both. I hope they do it. Zelensky's made it very clear that the terms of the deal on offer are unacceptable, as they would be to any nation state, because it is all but a surrender to the Russian invaders. Why does Donald Trump think that's a peace deal and not a surrender deal?
I'm not sure how to define it. I don't think it's a surrender deal. I think I think both sides are going to be unhappy with any outcome. Obviously Putin wanted to invade Kyiv and take over Ukraine. That didn't work out for him, thank goodness. But I do think that we're at a point, a stalemate, where it's just got to end. And I don't think everyone's going to be happy, and especially Zelensky. But I do think that look, they had an opportunity 18 months ago when the Joint Chief of Staff's chief Mark Milley went to Biden and said, this is at a stalemate. It's not the Ukrainians cannot win this war. Let's settle. And his counterpart in Ukraine went to Zelensky and said the same thing. Zelensky fired his military chief, and Biden ignored Mark Milley. And here we are 18 months later, probably pushing 24
But the problem isn't Zelensky or Ukraine. The problem is the Russian invading force. We're at a stalemate because Ukraine hasn't been given the weaponry and the aid that it could have been given by the West, by the US, by Europe, to enable it to fight back harder and to reclaim that territory. The thing I was asking, what American would cede, say, the equivalent of California or Florida to an invading force on the basis that, well, after 3.5 years, we're in a stalemate, we may as well give up? Because what's being asked of Ukraine is equivalent of that. Both Crimea and the Donbass are absolutely vital strategic parts of that nation state.
Yeah.
So why does America think that Ukraine should give up and surrender that territory when Americans would never do that with their own territory?
Right, but it's not our territory, and that's what's really clear to Americans right now. Yeah, I mean, it's essentially that's a point.
I like the honesty. We don't care.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily the case. I'm just
Why do you care about Israel then? That's not your territory either, but Trump cares about Israel.
Yeah, Ukraine does not rank. Okay, we can admit that. It doesn't mean that we want them to lose. It doesn't mean that we want them to continue fighting and dying either. So, look, the alternative, Julia, is Ukraine continues to fight and tries to win the war. Good luck with that. I don't think that's going to happen. No European country has volunteered boots on the ground.
True.
So all this kind of virtue signaling about Ukraine good, Russia bad, which is true, but who's going to fight that war?
The Ukrainians. No, the Ukrainians are
and they will run out of bodies
war.
Because Putin is not afraid to sacrifice his own people and the North Korean soldiers that he's sending into cannon fodder. He's not afraid to do that. They will win because they have more people to die. And that's a shame.
Well,
but it is what it is.
I think, again, you would think they'd have won by now on that basis, and yet they haven't, which tells you something.
And Ukrainians have been very brave. And in the beginning of the war, they fought off the invasion, and good for them. And I think, again, Mark Milley, Biden's Joint Chief of Staff's chief, said that and was very proud.
But here's the thing. Zelensky has made it.
Stalemate.
Zelensky has, a stalemate where you don't have the Russians taking over your entire country is preferable to where they would have been others. But here's the thing. Zelensky has made it clear, although he does not want there to be a deal where he loses any territory, but that losing Crimea and the areas of the Donbass region de facto, as in freezing the lines where the Russian troops have got control, but a guarantee, a cast iron 100% guarantee from America and Western European allies that not an inch more does any Russian steel toe cap venture over. Otherwise, no question at all, it's all over for Russia in Ukraine. If that security guarantee was given, it's been made very clear from Zelensky's office that that is something they would be willing to agree to. But that is not on the table. If Donald Trump really wanted peace and to stop what he calls the meat grind, although for some reason he claims it's cost millions of lives when it hasn't. If he really wanted peace to stop the meat grinder, he could have peace probably in a week's time. So why doesn't he offer that?
Because that's basically like a de facto admission of Ukraine into NATO. It basically means we will fight with boots on the ground with our young men and women in uniform to defend Ukraine.
But we wouldn't have to do that because Putin's so trustworthy. He's Donald Trump's friend.
That's what I'm saying.
Do you seriously think that Putin would be stupid enough to go into Ukraine with that guarantee, believing it to be real?
He's done crazier things.
He doesn't. No, Vladimir Putin doesn't do crazy things. On the contrary, he doesn't.
The wild card here is Putin. We all know that.
The wild card is Trump. Putin's very predictable. Putin said he didn't recognise Ukraine was a sovereign nation state. He wanted to expand the Russian Empire. He put 120,000 troops on the border, carried out exercises practising an invasion of Ukraine, put a load of tanks on the border, and then everyone went, "What a complete surprise that he's invaded." He said what he was going to do, and then he did it.
Yeah, well, look, I think that we've all learned that deterrence is what works, and they're peace through strength. And the time for deterrence was before February of 2022.
Okay,
it's a little late for that.
It's not late for that now because you could deter Putin from taking more of Ukraine.
Well, look, I think it's clear that the United States has to pivot to Asia, and there's no appetite for providing security guarantees for Ukraine when we're only in a position to fight a one-front war. Now, that's a shame because prior to Obama dialing down the military, we were prepared for a two-front war.
Okay.
Now we are not, and so it's just reality.
And I get that reality. And again, America is dealing with two enemies on two different fronts, across two different oceans. However, what do you think the message is that has been received loud and clear by President Xi Jinping of China from America, which is that we'll give you a bit of help, and then if you don't come to the table, do the deal, basically we're going to give up on you, and we've only got kind of 3 years in us in terms of interest in any war protecting a democratic nation state, like, for instance, Taiwan. What do you think that message is that China has received? Because I think the message they've received is, I think we'll have a go.
No, I think the message is that we are definitely pivoting to the Pacific and are well prepared. China is ascendant. They are trying to build up their navy. They have more ships than the United States right now, but our ships are much bigger and more powerful. Our Air Force is much bigger and more powerful. So, look, we're still the single superpower, but unfortunately, we are not prepared to fight a two-front war, especially not for Ukraine, who's not a member of NATO. So, look, it's an unpleasant situation, but I think it's up to the Europeans. The European economies combined are 10 times that of Russia.
Yeah, we need to step up.
And yet they have a pathetic military presence in Western Europe, outside of the UK, frankly. The UK is still, in a great condition, maybe not perfect. That's a different topic, but spending 2.5% of GDP on the military is still well prepared to defend their own country.
Well,
can't say that about France or Spain.
No, a large amount of that is on our nuclear capability, which we would hope we'd never use, but it means we haven't got quite the other hardware and men to fight. Greg Spencer, really appreciate you joining us. We appreciate your honesty. It's always so good to talk to you. He's chairman of Republicans Overseas UK. Philip Ingram, listening to that as a former military intelligence officer. Look, I mean, that was a lot of realpolitik there. Yep. This is a reality, America's dealing with China. Frankly, Ukraine's your problem, not our problem. Yep. We're out of here.
No,
that was what do you say?
I agree with a lot of what Greg said, and the US pivot to China is there. And the US is fighting on 3 fronts, not 2. So they've been supporting Europe and Ukraine. There's the Middle East, which is getting worse, and then Southeast Asia. But the one thing I disagree with is Ukraine losing, because again, Greg's talking about the tactical stalemate, and you're never going to win in than that. The tactical stalemate is good for Ukraine because it means Russia is not pushing them through. It's the operational level winning. It's that ability to attack the ability to sustain the conflict. Russia is losing at that because Ukraine's attacking its oil infrastructure, its ammunition dumps, its railway infrastructure, its defence manufacturing. That's why Russia relies on North Korea to provide 80% of its ammunition. So that will continue.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Lots of your calls still coming on that and all the other topics, particularly our former Labour guest. Also calls on social media as well. We'll be talking in just a couple of moments after a break to an executive head teacher at an academy trust about whether or not a social media curfew is the answer to the problems of kids basically spending far too much time and seeing all of the wrong things on social media. That's up next. This is Talk.
As we watch it get worse, it's still better than where they're coming from, unfortunately. But, he doesn't need to reclaim the flag, he doesn't, of course, it might not surprise you to know that when he had his little soiree in Downing Street, the soiree for celebrating St George's Day, this was last night, there's some footage of him walking up the stairs in Downing Street with Mrs Starmer, who hasn't been seen for a very long time. They've obviously decided that we better put some form of pictorial evidence out that she's still with him, because otherwise people will start talking.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get straight to our next topic. We've been talking about it actually throughout the show, and this is the plans for the government for some sort of social media curfew. It's similar to that TV watershed 9 p.m. point where, kids shouldn't be watching, so now we'll put on all the nasty thrillers about women being brutally raped and killed, which seems to be what everything is on television after 9 p.m. But would a social media curfew make any difference? Couldn't kids just get round it? And when they say it's making life more safe for kids, aren't they also restricting freedoms for adults as well? Let's talk about this with Mark Lehane. He's an executive head teacher at Wootton Academy Trust. He's also a former Conservative Special Advisor at the Education Department. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark.
Thanks for having me on.
Do you think some sort of curfew, some sort of rule where, apparently TikTok have already got this 10 p.m. curfew for under 16, so you can sort of be programmed in if you're a child account that actually you can't use it after a certain time. A, would that work as in practically, technically work? And B, would it actually help kids?
So I think probably curfew on social media would help, because anything that makes it a bit harder for youngsters to get on there might mean that fewer of them get on there in the first place. But let's be honest, certainly I've got 4 daughters of my own. They're way more tech savvy than I am. They will very quickly find ways around if they aren't there. Yeah. But the most important thing I'd say to this is, look, there's that lovely phrase, isn't there? It takes a village to raise a child. So yes, the state can do their bit. Yes, the social media companies should do their bit. But this is really a parental thing. Yeah. You would not believe, or indeed you might believe, the amount of time we spend in schools dealing with problems raised by mobile phones and social media, be it the arguments that kids have out of hours, how late they are up into the night, and hence they come to school exhausted, the mental health issues that can cause. In fact, just like adults, if you're on your phone all the time, you get very wired. So anything we can do to encourage kids to have less time on their screens is good. But fundamentally, the number one set of people that should be doing that is their parents. They're the only people who can parent kids. And actually, I'm in the middle of writing a policy statement for the 2 schools that I run about what can we do as a school to stop pointing kids towards screens, particularly their smartphones, outside of hours to do homework or stuff like that.
Absolutely. It's such an issue. We've been saying throughout the show about this comes down parents, and there'll be parents who just don't care, don't make an effort. We know that parents who just they're busy on their own phones, they haven't got time. I'm just busy doing this. Like, go and do what you want, kid, and use them as the electronic babysitter. But there are also parents who want to do the right thing and just say, I can't get my kid off their phone because all the other kids in their class are on their phone. And a lot of them are crying out for the schools to make stricter rules. I know Catherine Burble-Singh is also a head teacher. She's part of the campaign to ban mobile phones completely for under 16-year-olds. And I have to say, first of all, I was thinking, no, that's not necessary. I mean, certainly smartphones, that's not a good idea. But I'm coming round to that. Would that make it easier? Because the peer pressure on kids and on parents is so extreme now.
No, it really is, and it's a classic societal coordination problem, isn't it? So I'm a meanie with my girls. My younger 2, they're teenagers. They do have a smartphone, but they only get very limited access each day because I've locked it down. But that's all they've ever known. They get 30 minutes a day, or the old one, an hour a day on it.
Oh,
that's it. Okay. They know they're not allowed their phones up in their bedroom. Yeah. Now that's because I'm a teacher, I'm a meanie, and I was quite happy to be the bad guy. But for lots of other parents, that is hard. But what I would say is, you're the only people that can do that. Now, where a curfew or a legal ban on smartphones would help parents is, if you like, they can go, not me, guys, it's the law. It gives them another thing to hide behind.
And also, none of your mates are doing it either, so you're not missing out.
But then again, when we were kids, we always felt that everyone else's... when we were younger, we always thought our friends had an easy time with their parents. I was always telling my mum, well, my mates are allowed to do X, Y, and Z, and my mum just go, yeah, whatever, get on with it.
I would always say, go and live in their house then. Pack your stuff up, off you go.
So fundamentally, it is a question of parenting. That's not to criticise parents. To say, do you know what? You have got the power. You've got the ability to do this. Schools and others will back you up.
And we've had that for years. I remember the amount of times I've seen interviews with parents saying, oh, I mentioned this earlier, well, my kids aren't playing violent video games for 12 hours a day. OK, A, how did your 13-year-old get hold of that video game? Because someone had to buy it for him. And B, just unplug it, cut the plug off, end of, nothing to discuss. I do not understand why parents feel they don't have that power, but a lot of parents feel they don't. In terms of what they're seeing, in your experience as a head teacher, what is the issue? Because we told about, there's upskirting at schools, there's the violent pornography that kids are seeing. There is, the pro-anorexia, pro-self-harm stuff. I would say, if we're going to talk about harmful content, the pro-trans ideology content is something that I think is harmful for children. Constant talk about anxiety and mental health and all of that. Loads of evidence that constantly talk about that. Very bad for children's self-esteem and self-worth. What are you most concerned about in terms of what they are seeing?
Well, I think you've hit all the big ones there, OK? So, like I said, it is... If a really good friend of mine put it like this once, if you wouldn't let your kids out in Soho unaccompanied at night, why would you let them get on their phone unmonitored? Yeah. It's that simple. If you don't know what they're looking at, then you should assume they're seeing the worst thing. Now, we can't protect them from everything, but those terrible kinds of things you described, they're all out there. Lots of kids will have a way to deal with it. If they come across stuff that's really bad, they will talk to the parents, but lots of them won't. So the best thing we can do as a society is work together on this. But talk to any head teacher or teacher, they will tell you lots of those issues that we're dealing with now that weren't there 10 years ago are purely there because of not just social media, but the access that youngsters have to it on their smartphone 24/7.
And again, it's not even, I think a lot of parents don't understand, it's not even the bad stuff they're seeing. It's the supposedly, good stuff. It's the funny YouTube video. It's sort of that. Actually, that is part of the problem. It's still part of that addictive problem and kids needing this buzz. Once you've seen all these funny videos and you're on that algorithm, books seem a bit boring.
Those platforms are designed to be addictive. If you look at some of the lead transcripts that Jonathan Haidt's got a hold of, we know that those platforms are designed to be addictive, or sticky as they call it. We also know most executives in those platforms don't let their own kids have access to them. Listen, I'm as guilty as the rest. I've only just locked myself out of a load of apps on my phone over Easter so I could have a proper break. If it's hard for us, imagine what it's like for youngsters who haven't learned those restraints over the years. But we can do this together, but it's not, a curfew would not solve it all. We need parents, companies, government and society to come together.
Brilliant. Really good to talk to you, Mike Lehane, Executive Head Teacher at Wotton Academy Trust. Just a quick word from Philip Ingram. I mean, love to send my kids to school. I mean, that's the standard. Again, we've got a lot of head teachers who don't even know how to stop kids using mobile phones in the classroom, for goodness sake.
But it's fantastic hearing a head teacher or associate head teacher talking common sense and giving some real tips, and it's educating the parents. Educate the parents.
It's what we've been saying. It's what a lot of the callers have been saying as well. Ian Collins is here. We've just told him to put his phone down. He's on this phone when he got into the studio.
You're just finishing a game of Fortnite.
These are our work tools. That's where we're allowed to use
Indeed.
them. Do you have this issue with your family?
100%. This was a conversation last night, and it's ongoing.
Oh, was it a conversation by text?
Indeed, we don't talk to each other. But it is, I mean, the whole issue of phones and kids around phones and what they can look at. I mean, I'm like yourself, ultimately parental responsibility, that's really where it starts. However, it's 21st century. You would think that, some of the tech companies might have just made it pretty true. You think, like YouTube, for example, if you didn't want YouTube on your phone, you think there would just be a button that simply deletes it, never to be found again.
You can do, it's there.
You just reload it, you just go to the Apple Store, you just go to Safari, watch it
But
that
it is
way.
amazing how addictive it is for adults. We know one of the reasons the kids are on their phones is because the parents want the kids to be on their phones, and they go, oh, isn't it awful?
Babysitter.
You gave them the phone far too young, you allowed them to do all this stuff,
100%.
you're not interested. But let's face it, we all know that certainly, I think even by 8, let alone 16, they're more tech savvy than we are.
100%. Well, by the way, I had to go on the phone in the train only yesterday doing the FaceTime call.
We were talking about this earlier. The Lib Dems, a £1,000 fine for people
fair play.
playing loud.
The first thing Ed Davey's come up with in his life that makes sense. It's a great idea.
I'm just amazed he didn't announce it whilst going down a water slide.